think they knew that I had given my blood and my every milliliter of my sweat trying to make it work, but I guess I just wasn't clever enough to come up with something that would really blow everybody away and be something completely different.
I remember the whole of that production being one of great conflict between everybody. It was just set up wrong to begin with.
It was a very sort of bad period for us, all this film, because we were fighting a losing battle all the time.
People get more conservative, the costs get greater, the studio gets scared that they're not going to make as much money, and you better do every little beat that was in the first two because they know they work, but of course the audience is ahead of you if you do that.
Well, Alien 3, everybody wanted to make the sequel to Alien, kind of except us. We weren't so, I mean, we were happy to do it, but we weren't all that enthused. Because we thought, you know, what do you do with this one to make it different? You know, the whole idea you can't do something that's just going to be a reheat of one or two.
We knew we wanted to carry the company's duplicity and need for this weapon further. And we wanted to find an environment that was rich and ominous. At first we thought about a scientific way station in space where sort of covert experimentation was going to go on. And subsequently we thought about making it Alcatraz in space.
We went through a series of writers and a series, you know, some directors, and, you know, we talked to Ridley about doing it. We talked, you know, to, I think, who was Rennie Harlan, somebody we actually hired at one point.
When I signed on to do Alien 3, my first principle was that I'm not going to copy Ridley Scott or Jim Cameron. They are fantastic filmmakers, and I felt that if I could bring something new into the series, then it was really worth doing. And it wasn't just a movie that is just a sequel, but it was really a movie on its own, taking all the great heritage from its predecessors. My original approach was that we would go to where the aliens actually come from. We would place the story on the planet where they really originate from and really explain what they are. And maybe they are not born to be bad at all.
We talked about the Planet of the Aliens because it just cost too much money in those days. Now you could do, I'd like to see Ridley do that. That would be good.
Other concepts that were floating around in those days were also the idea of the aliens coming to Earth.
On Earth, everyone can hear you scream.
I think the first version that we had was a version that was based on work that Walter Hill and David Giler had done with William Gibson.
What we expected from Gibson was that we were going to get kind of fabulous ideas, but the script would be a mess and we could have to sort it out and fix it. What we got was a perfectly executed script that wasn't all that interesting.
The next writer after that who was involved was Eric Red, who did The Hitcher, and there was also this concept of a prison ship where the aliens end up. Eric worked on a version of this prison ship, and I wasn't that crazy about that concept because I just wanted to get out there to the planet, and I was afraid that there was just no way around the fact that we are going to end up in a similar kind of an environment with lots of corridors and lots of bulkheads and doorways and the kind of things that we've seen before. And then also David Toohey was involved.
His has prisoners on it. His is a prisoner's being shipped off into space to a planet. You follow the guy who is the prisoner being shipped off.
There was also talk about not necessarily having Sigourney Weaver involved in Alien 3.
Yes, I mean, there was a question of whether she wanted to do a third one. There was always that lingering question from those, since no women turned out for Alien 2 either. So there was a question of, couldn't we try to develop a male action hero for the franchise? So we were going to try to do that. None of this came to pass, of course.
First of all, I found out I wasn't going to be in the movie. Okay, I mean, I heard it through my agent or whatever. That you're not in it, which was very painful. It hurt me a lot because I didn't really even get paid very well for Alien, and I thought, okay, well, if there's anybody who's going to be, usually with any sequel like that, they keep the characters. It's just a done deal.
James Cameron used to always talk about the possibilities of Alien 3 and what would happen, and everyone who was dying off used to always have their little jokes as to whether they were coming back or they might be an alien when they came back and things like that. And James Cameron always used to tell us that he always kind of planned on Ripley, Hicks, and Newt going back to Earth and being a family. And throughout the movie, there's different parts where there's a shot of the three of us. And like in MedLab, when the aliens had attacked Sigourney, there's a shot of me giving Sigourney a hug and Hicks right behind her, and that was like, I think, his big family shot.
Maybe I saw it more as becoming like a team, like Ripley and Hicks from then on in, and whether it was Sigourney or whoever, probably rightfully so, did not see it that way.
How we began the story was one of the most interesting things. Do we keep the sort of family motif going, or do we? To me, Ripley's always been a sort of solitary person, even though she wants the other thing.
Are we gonna sleep all the way home?
All the way home.
Can I dream?
Yes, honey. I think we both can.
I believe that when you are doing a sequel and you're part of the series, that you do want to give the audience in a certain way, you want to give them the same kind of an experience. They expect to see aliens, and they expect to see the heroine and certain type of situations. So I do believe that you want to give that satisfaction, but at the same time, I do believe that your job is to invent something new and offer the audience something new, because otherwise you're just rehashing what people before you did. So that was always my goal, and ultimately the reason why I had to make the hard decision and go to Walter Hill and say, Walter, I'm really sorry, I think I've been working on this for a year, and we've done illustrations and we've worked on all these storylines, but I really feel like somehow we keep circling the same premise, and for me it's not different enough from what the audience has seen before, and I just can't get excited about the idea of just having more guns and more aliens.
There were lots of versions, none of which were particularly successful, we thought. And then we hired Vincent Ward. We saw The Navigator. And when he came in and talked about it, it was definitely different. This was going to be a whole new, notion of Alien.
I got the call to come to LA, got the offer to direct Alien 3. I told them I wasn't interested in sequels. By the third phone call, I thought, well, I might as well give it a shot. I looked at the script they'd sent me. I didn't like it. I thought it was just the standard sci-fi stuff that you expect, all the gadgetry and so on. But I had a tiny idea, and on the plane over, in my imagination, I expanded it into a story. So by the time I got to LA, I sat in with the head of the studio, I sat in with my studio executive and with the producers, and I pitched this story to them. And really to my surprise, because I just wanted to get out of Australia for a break, they really liked it.
And then we were really gearing up to make the movie. They were really talking about making this movie. And Sigourney met with them, and she was happy with them. And everybody was pleased, and this was all going forward.
Very shortly after writing the story for Alien 3, I'd hopped off the plane, I'd written up the story. Within a month, the owner of the studio had given us a release date. Now that's great for somebody who wants to keep working, but it's not great if you're being adventurous about a story and exploring it.
I always felt that Alien 3 was a movie that initially as a studio, we set out to make a release date and not make a movie. And I think along the way, that changed, but that really set us back.
In the meantime, they were over in London and they were drawing up sets and they were, we'd hired an art director and we were, moving along.
My production designer who I'd hired was working away building sets in London. We had the Bond stage, which is the largest stage in London at that time.
The prime reason why I wanted to do this picture was at that time it was going to be Monks in Space, a Gothic movie, and I would really like very much to do that because the opportunities of doing that sort of thing are far and few and far between.
I was involved right at the beginning with Vincent Ward, and his concept and visualization of the film was of a wooden planet floating in space, which was peopled by monks.
I had the world very strongly in my imagination, a wooden-clad environment with floors and floors, sometimes hundreds of meters high each floor, with each of their different parts of their monastic guilds in each of the floors.
We were all wondering how the hell we were going to do it and make it look as fantastic and as great as the previous two.
People were confused a bit by Vincent because he was very slow in coming to any decision.
I mean, everyone has a series of visual images. It's like reading a book, isn't it? Certain things pop into your head, certainly. And that's depending upon the director's views. We combine, it's sometimes directors have a clear vision exactly what they want to do. Others don't have very much idea at all. So it's a matter really of, cutting the cloth to suit whoever the individual happens to be, really.
And then things happened that brought around changes.
Even though I'd had a commitment from everybody that they loved this idea, the idea that I'd had, by the time I was heading over to England and getting close to hiring crew and so on, they said, well, we like 2 out of 3 of your ideas. And I went, yeah, well, we like the bit where the alien, where you're going to scare the bejesus out of people and you're going to have an alien in Sigourney. The bit about the world, well, one producer said, well, couldn't they just be convicts? And I went, ah. And then another producer said, who didn't necessarily agree with the first producer, but they kind of there seemed to be a trade-off going, said, well, why do we need this wooden environment anyway? Why don't we just have it a mining colony? So I went, guys, but we signed off on this. This is what you agreed to. And then, for a while they backed off on that. And then I got this kind of list of saying, we want the following changes. Meet tomorrow with one of the key senior executives at Fox. I was made to wait outside a door for an hour, like a school kid. And I was in a terrible mood, I have to say, by the time I'd waited for an hour. And I'd seen this list, which was very aggressive. It was, you do, you obey. So I tried to talk my way around it and was completely unsuccessful. I was told, do it or be fired. First I said, you know what, I'd rather be fired.
We started out with a director who is a tremendous visualist in his own right. But it tends to be more on the artsy-fartsy side than on the big commercial side. And I think there's a way to balance out both. And I think one of the great things that both Ridley Scott and James Cameron did on the first 2 Aliens is create dynamic visual worlds, but in an action-packed commercial environment. And I think the first director sort of was going away from that.
By this stage, because the original Alien and Aliens had become very successful, it had a different meaning than the first Alien had, which was relatively low budget, relatively unknown star, not too much was at risk. Now everything was at risk. This was the franchise, and this was what was going to keep the studio going, this one film. So they look at me and they go, well, this guy from New Zealand, he's got this kind of wild idea, he's made these independent films, I don't know, do we trust him or not? So there became a lot of cooks involved, in the making of this broth. So the whole thing became shaky with my star, and I love working with actors, with my producers getting wanting something a lot safer, with a release date looming. It was like being on a platform and watching all the things crumble below you, and frankly trying to do this dance to kind of keep everything together.
The reasons he departed were many and varied, I think, but there were many rumours a female was involved. I don't know. I really don't know what would happen.
My line producer, who was fantastic, and he warned me one day. He said, "You know, your assistant, you know, the assistant that the studio organised for you," and I went, "Yes, tall, beautiful, yes, love her, fantastic." He goes, "She's phoning in every night to the studio. And you know, your production designer gets phone calls every night from the studio behind your back." He said, "You're aware of this, aren't you?" I went, yeah, sure." So I'd said to my studio exec, "Look, you know, I need another assistant, I need something, she's overqualified." And it's amazing. In the end, it only takes one personal relationship. If there's mixed agendas and that kind of highly politically charged situation, that can undermine everything.
So then Fincher was suggested by the studio.
I never met the director that took over for me. I think David's very talented. I thought he had an impossible task ahead of him to take over a story that had been kind of gutted and try and then turn it into something else, with people writing pages for you as you're on the set.
I didn't envy David because it's sometimes when you go through a long development process and there are lots of people involved, it can really get you in a situation where it's very hard to still find your vision and be able to do what you really set out to do in the first place.
The first direction I had, Sigourney realising that the only way that the people in this monastery could survive was if she herself killed herself. I had it really simple, which was there was a wheat field in front of this cathedral inside this huge dome space, and there's a fire in the wheat field, and she just walks very quietly into the fire, and you just see her back walking away from us, and that would have been the end of the movie. The studio really liked that, but they wanted the series to continue, so they said, "Look, can't you find a way to have her survive?" So I said, "Sure." She has this friend who's a monk. There's this ambiguous sort of sexual frisson going on between them. Nothing ever happened in my version. It was all about what could have happened if people made different choices in their lives. And there's a weird, he goes back through his medieval books, he finds these pictures, he sees exorcisms. They find a way of, both, so it feels in a scientific way, of pushing it out of her body in a weird way before it has time to fully grow and burst through the chest. They get it in time, like an abortion, like an exorcism, whichever way you want to go. But it's sufficiently agile as a creature to go inside him. It must find a host. It must seek warmth straight away. And I had the same ending where he walked into the fire. We took both versions to Sigourney. She said, "Well, I don't want to live through another one of these series again. I'm sick of doing them. Just kill me. I like the first version." And so she said to the studio, "I'm not going to do it unless you kill me off." Which of course they did, and then of course they would, had to come alive again. So that was the gist of my story.
I liked it a lot because it was just a very different thing. Some of I was just wondering how they were going to pull off the wooden planet, but generally it was pretty good. Some people were scratching their heads.
I had a hard time with because I'm so grounded in physics and reality, and even though we're doing science fiction, things follow the laws of physics. Atmosphere has to build up over hundreds and thousands of feet to get enough weight to have thick enough, dense enough atmosphere for us to breathe.
We could never quite, get him to explain or ever figure out a reason why this planet would be wood or should be wood or anything like that. Always liked the idea, but felt you've got to have some kind of logic to this stuff. There's a wooden planet in space. Why is it wood? How did it get there? Where do they get the trees? There were just too many questions that it raised.
And then there was also an element that I remember of the alien. At one point, it comes in and it sort of taunts Ripley, and it's got the body of what ended up becoming the Bishop character. But it's twisted his head off, and it's actually taunting her with it, and in a way it's almost like threatening her with what its capabilities are. And at that point, I remember that it just seemed like it added too much of a human element, sort of like a human agenda to the alien, which also seemed out of character and out of touch with what we've seen already.
Not a huge amount of it survived in what became of Alien 3. Certainly the sense and meaning of it was totally ceased to make any sense at all based on what the original inspiration had been. There was nothing left of the world, which was, I felt, very unique. I'd never seen anything like that in film before, and I thought it could be very powerful, and it fitted into, the personal themes that seemed could fit very well for her character in terms of her stage in life and where she was at. And then, of course, the monks became bald-headed convicts. So only thing that really remained substantially was that there was this creature within her. And even that wasn't really explored in any meaningful way.
All movies start with one thing, which is a script. And David never had that.
I think David felt like once we got into the shooting, then his destiny would be in his own hands. And until we were shooting, he was subject to too many influences.
Finch had a big smile on his face in those days, early on. And soon, for one reason or another, the smile was gradually wiped off his face.
I think that when you go through any production, it's difficult, it's hard. I think when you go through your first one without a script, it's even harder.
We got flown to London to start putting a crew together, and of course I think they were happy that we had been involved in the last one and that there would be a continuity.
Vincent Ward had been over there and had been working with Norman Reynolds, who did the sets for Alien 3, had built the sets for the Vincent Ward script. Then they brought Fincher on as a new director.
David Fincher was suggested by head of the studio, actually, Roger Birnbaum. And we looked at his reels and we met him.
We had lunch with him at the Fox commissary, David, Walter, and I, and we had not met him before. And he was incredibly impressive. One of the most extraordinary meetings I think I've ever had. And it just gave us the confidence.
David comes from music videos as well as some magnificent commercials. He has an effects background. He used to work at ILM.
He was an effects cameraman who went into the music video industry, did a number of really pretty high-profile music videos, and Alien, I guess, was his first feature.
We wanted to, once again, to go with a director that did not have an established track record per se, but we thought was going to be a major director in the years to come.
I thought Fincher was a great idea, and so I liked him right away. Then we were in this big meeting at Fox, and with all the suits and everything, and I think he was wearing an animal rights T-shirt. I finally said toward the end of the meeting, "So how do you picture Ripley in this movie?" And he said, "I don't know, bald?" And that was the moment where I fell in love with him, because I thought, that's such a great idea. you have to do it. You know, you have to make it make sense. But I just thought, absolutely.
So Fincher committed, and we were back in London, and now we're going to rewrite the script.
And David Fincher was like a breath of fresh air, really. And in fact, I was the first person to greet him in the art department. I thought, in fact, he was the director's assistant. He was so young.
He came in not having that preparation time, not having all the meetings, and not necessarily having a full script to work with, because of the conceptual differences that the first director that they had employed had brought onto the production. He then wanted to put his ideas into Alien 3.
He took Vincent's original idea, but he changed it to a mechanized planet. He changed it to a convict planet.
David wanted a more mechanical concept of this planet that was perhaps at one time had been a very thriving factory kind of a planet, and I don't know whether it had always been a prison planet or it turned into that, but in the meantime everything was in waste and rusted and broken down, and quite once again a dark look to everything.
He did say at one point what he was looking for was something where you could throw in a bucket of water and just hose the place down, the entire planet. So that's his sort of brief to me, and that's from that all sorts of things have sprung, really.
It was Fincher's idea to shave all their heads, put barcodes on there, you know. He had a whole other quite different take, but would allow us to, you know, was within the realm of, it was a spin-off of Vincent's original idea.
They had started out with Vincent with this script, and because of the old creative difference, problem, and then he was gone. So they had all this money that they'd already spent on, making pay-or-play deals with actors and so on, plus building all these sets. And Norman builds the world, and I mean, he was like going berserk building sets over there because that's what he loves to do, and he's great at it. So I mean, they had a lot of money invested in this movie, but all of a sudden they didn't have a script.
The script that we originally spoke about has changed very much so. So what I did was actually to design the set in such a way that it basically embodied some of the things that David wanted to do, and sort of set them up where I thought best. And I think David actually went back to the set, and with the writer, they sort of evolved things that he wanted to do, but was more precise about where they were actually going to be done. It's almost the cart before the horse in some ways,
So that rewrite came in, and it was a disaster, and everybody walked off the movie. So nobody was going to do that one.
There was a 3-month period where we were in effect shut down. We kept working on the creature stuff, but we were kind of working away on dead bodies and things, not the actual creature.
We spent most of the summer working on the dead bodies of Hicks and Newt and Bishop that they find in the wreckage, as well as starting design work on the alien, because at that point everything else in the script was subject to being thrown out. We didn't know where all that stuff was going to go. So we had a crew of Americans. We had a lot of our English crew was assembled, and we were just going into great detail on these bodies, trying to continue to have work to keep people busy with for a number of months before the script was finally revised to the point and we could start trying to catch up for the rest of production, because the shoot was going to be happening in I think it started in November.
Yeah, you'll be real glad to know that everybody's back in this movie. Hicks?
Rafaela De Laurentiis, who I was doing this movie for, a little movie that I won't mention the name of, she had been over to the Pinewood Studios, and she said she saw my character, Hicks, made up of like a dummy character of me, laying on the ground with my chest opened up, as if the alien came out of me. I said, oh, that's interesting. So I called my agent, who's Ed L'Amato, who's like way up there, and I said, Ed, what the fuck, man? I mean, it's one thing not to be in it. It's another thing for me to have had fucking that alien come back in me and have it come out of my chest with, blah, blah, blah. I said, no fucking way can they do this, can they? And he said, no, man, that's your likeness and they can't, so on and so forth. So he called them up and he said, I don't know how far they got, but they were told that they couldn't do that, and we would sue them. And so first they started saying, well, can we pay Michael for this? Can we pay, we'll pay him a certain amount of money. I said, I don't care how much money you have. I was really stupid back then. I don't care how much money you have, that alien is not coming out of my chest, okay? And so that was that. So then we got a call, you know, a month or two later that they wanted to use my photograph. I said, now you can pay me. So they did. So I got paid almost as much for that photograph as I did for the first movie that I did. So in certain respect, it helped a little bit, but it was that was all done through like gritted teeth and them saying, well, you know, yeah, okay, we'll pay you, and I'll say, well, you'll pay me more, and back and forth, and so on and so forth, and it wasn't very harmonious, and I'm sure it'll never work. If I would have known David Fincher was going to be David Fincher, I probably would have said, well, you do whatever you want, David, just use me in one of your future movies.
Fincher had wanted Richard E. Grant. We thought, to be quite candid, that Richard Grant was too young and that he was kind of too soft for this kind of prison environment. There was a real argument about that. It was decided to go to screen tests, and it was him and it was Charles Dance. Very clear to us that it should be Charles Dance. There were others who wanted, you know, Richard Grant. We prevailed. Eventually, Sigourney agreed that if Walter and I would write it, she would do it on, you know, on faith. And Fincher did too.
It's a hard character to write, Ripley. They're really the only ones, except for maybe Jim, who understand her, because she's always written like a very tough, obnoxious woman by other writers, you know. Shit, crap, you know, it's all this really. But they know that she's just sort of somewhat aloof.
So Walter and I started writing while they were building, you know, and you know, kind of took this concept of Vincent's and turned it around a bit.
This is where they had a disconnect with David. It was like, you know, he's a great shooter. That was the word that constantly was being said to me, and that the management of the story would be not really his responsibility. And the studio and maybe Walter and David or whoever they brought in as writers, you know, they would sort of take responsibility for, you know, giving him an approved script that then he would go ahead and do an incredible job shooting. And I think they, you know, they underestimated, one, his total obstinance to do anything he doesn't want to do, and two, that, you know, you can't pull a rabbit out of your hat on a script.
They hired him, and it was a great idea, and then almost as soon as he started, they started kind of, unwittingly or not, undermining him.
I get this call, first from Tom Jacobson, who's in London, and he goes, and I had called him about some, you know, script I wanted him to look at, and he was calling me back. I said, Tom, thanks for calling me back. He said, no, I'm not calling you back. I'm calling you, sit down. So he said, I'm in London, you know, we have this chaos on Alien 3, we're going to replace the line producer, and we want you to come here.
This was just before we were going to start shooting. And there was a figure that the movie was going to cost, you know, flat. And we told them, and they said, it can't be that. It has to be this. We said, they gave us another figure. We said, look, it cannot be that. Sorry, there's this, you know, not with this director, not with these sets, not with this. It's just never going to be that. And if you say that it's going to be that, it's going to end up costing more, because when you're aiming low and you go over, you go way over, which of course is exactly what happened. It went way, way over.
So I get there and I'm trying to read this stuff on the plane and look at these storyboards and try to understand the genesis of the script, and I get there and there's enormous construction going on a scale that I had never actually done, to be honest. And I'm looking, and every stage at Pinewood is us in these giant sets with metal and cranes and you know, just phenomenal and, you know, brilliant. I mean, I'm going, wow. And everybody knows I'm coming, and I'm like, you know, I have an assistant and I have this and I have that, and everyone's waiting for me, and I see Sigourney, and she looks at me and she goes, welcome to the rat's nest. And I said, oh, that's gonna be fun. What I was so shocked with, so really taken by, was that we were 3 weeks out on what at that point I think was a $42 or $43 million movie, which was very big at that point, with a guy who's never made a feature film before, and a very precious franchise, and that, they didn't pull the plug. You know what I mean? It was like, that I thought was the interesting decision, bringing this all together, kind of script evolving with 3 weeks to go, huge investment in construction based on pages that might change, storyboards that were clearly hundreds of days of shooting if you looked at them. And once I looked at these storyboards, I just said, this is impossible. It's endless. And we'll just, I'll have an English accent when I leave here.
I had always liked the alien in the first film, and I felt that there were too many aliens in the second one, especially played by sort of short, bulky stunt guys, So I wanted to go back to the mystery of having one alien, which Fincher had already decided to do, but he did want a creature which we'd never seen before.
Gordon Carroll, he asked me to do some new creatures. They want redesign the alien monsters.
David was very interested in bringing Giger back on this one to get his take on the concepts.
In his mind was a kind of puma or a beast like that. That was difficult. When finally I did it, it came out like a lion something, and that was not exactly that what he wanted. He wanted to have an erotic alien also. So I made my lips and the chin. With this part you can make a erotic lady. You don't need more than that, this part. That's the design I did for Alien 3 during 1 month. Sketches, and yeah, they are all for the fax machine.
He didn't come to London, wanted to stay in Zurich, and he was doing sketches from his studio in Zurich.
I made drawings with ink and the size that they go through the machine, and I made a lot of these drawings, and I worked very close together with Connie de Vries, and he is modeling in plaster scene the things, and so we discussed everything, and that's much better than to work alone.
The purpose of the figure. Of course it is easier for David Fincher probably to see how it is really like from the top, from the back, from all the how it functions as a three-dimensional figure, because this you will see then in the movies.
Just to show, the first alien I did was more a human being, and the third film, it's more a beast, more elegant. All the mistakes or the not nice forms, I try here to make it better, to make it more elegant, more quick, and more aesthetic. There are, for instance, these tubes on the back. I did them because of the long skull. If he stands, but if he's like a beast, then the long head is just over the shoulder. He doesn't need any supporting.
This is also an idea of Giger and me, the kind of the swords in between of the fingers. So he can like touch and suddenly swatch, the swords are coming out through the fingers.
There was this short chest. I make it longer, I made longer legs like a spider, not. And then the tongue of the first alien was so like a, in a way, not organic. It was a tube with these teeth in front. It was really not. So I make a very elegant tongue, like a sword. They can roll the tongue out, push out, and then it goes. The victim got in the mouth, and by pulling back, the whole interior of the victim came out. It must be horrible. Then I have some design of the kiss. There are different kind of kisses. One, there probably he could, this alien could be very erotic, and there are a lot of monks here, and probably it could be a situation where they kiss each other and come close with the lips, and then like here, and then finally zack, and probably you see the eye open a little bit, and then you see some blood running between the lips, and then he pulls out, and then it will be like that a little bit. I mean, this one with the kiss was tilted behind his head, and now he's going at everything back. Here, the poor guy has pointed the lips for a kiss, but he kissed him in the eye. I tried to make a kind of second skin, like, that they are perhaps from a saxophone or from something that work, and they give sound, and how the creature feel. So you should hear how he feels. It's a kind of finger brain who should move, like when a wind is blowing over the grain. And this is the color. The color, they can be open. If this goes like that, they will be pointed, so pointed like a so. The Bambi design, that was the idea of Mr. Fincher, to have a Bambi like, it shouldn't be like the chest burster, an ugly thing. It should be Bambi, so a creature you like in a way, but not too nice. And first, my first design was too nice. There has been like little bears, so I made it longer feet, and also a little, like Bambi is a little helpless. That it's the ox who was attacked by a face hugger. They didn't know, and they cut him off, and then the baby alien came out. The baby alien looked like...
If we were to incorporate all of Giger's designs, I think it just would have been impossible. He had so many ideas.
In a kind of sack, or in a kind of...
And we were at a point where we had to just dive into it. You know, we had sort of lost time during the months while the script was being revised without the start date being pushed. And when that script was ready, it's like you had to jump on it right away, so there was no more time to really develop things in tandem with Giger. And Fincher was looking at sculptures we were doing, and he was totally, satisfied with where we were going.
It was just 1 month's time to talk, and then I didn't hear anything. I think they had no time to do it. I think I did too much for them, and the time was short, and I think the idea is okay, but it would be great to have it.
We took our cues from David, mostly. The Bambi burster was the exception to that, and I think David really liked what Giger drew for the Bambi burster.
So our goal on Alien 3 became, since there's one alien, to really focus on that alien and to make it everything that Giger's artwork says it is, all those images, what they evoke, and how we could tie that into, a world of foam rubber and fiberglass and everything we need to do to make the thing move, and make it seem alive. Even down to the whole paint scheme. The whole paint scheme was derived from his what we interpreted as his palette that he was using on these characters. We had a couple of phone calls where we actually spoke with Giger, and at the time he told us that he was working on a sculpture. He was doing a full-size maquette of the alien in his studio. So he invited us to come to Switzerland, invited Alec and I to come to Switzerland, and at the time we were so under the gun, schedule-wise, that we, respectfully said, we can't do that right now. And that is the one thing that I always regret, to have had that invitation, and to just kind of put it off for now and say, maybe when the film is done, maybe afterwards. And then, of course, by the time the film was done, he wasn't involved at all, and the offer was no longer there, and I think things were strained by then between Giger and Fox. And unfortunately, we became part of the enemy. Ironically, our best interests were, how can we present Giger's work in a way that is respectful of Giger's work? But by the end, I know subsequently in the years since then, he just has not responded favorably to what we've done, in terms of how we've looked at the alien.
Alien 3 was a tough shoot. It was a long shoot, and again, we're working at Pinewood Studios in London, and it's, working through those winter months in freezing cold sound stages, and, everybody gets miserable, everybody gets sick, and that really takes a toll on you.
So no kidding, it's really cold here. I think they said this is the coldest weather they've had in 4 years.
In these pictures, they've always had, long working hours and often 6-day weeks and just a killer schedule and no mercy from the studio.
We went through this production continually reworking the script to make up for a short pre-production, a rush into... The movie got greenlit based on a whole different version of the script. And David was forced to deal with that in a very short period of time, where he had to design the alien, he had to design the sets, and he had to write the script all the way into the depths of production.
We were not working with a full, completed script to its conclusion, so that is problematical because you're dealing with a catch-up process all the time, trying to sort of move forward, but also trying to finish off. Because the days we work are very long. So if you're trying to finish a script, certainly as a director, not that he was a writer, but if you're trying to work with the writers to conclude something, you're going to have huge problems trying to do that whilst working at very long days that we work as well.
It became apparent, even just after a couple of weeks, that sequence that we just shot may not make it. So we're going to shoot another version of it. It seemed expensive. You could have made 2 or 3 pictures, probably out of the footage that we shot.
I don't really remember them kind of really being part of, the chaos, except when the script came in and suddenly, they had less to do.
10 days in, things became slightly problematic. We'd already shot some footage of Golic in a straitjacket and the thing, and I'm doing the thing with the teeth and the Charles Manson accent, and as I saw it. And I can't remember the exact circumstances, but we had to stop for half a day. And I got the impression, though Fincher was too kind to probably at the time to say it, but it was my fault. I remember I was sent to the dressing room, for a lie down. And he came in an hour later, and he said, listen, drop the accent. So there's a scene, I've watched the picture where in one scene I'm sounding like God knows who. Charles Manson, or Charles Manson's British cousin.
He's unminds. Nobody can stop it.
What about Boggs and
But
Rains?
it got slaughtered like pigs. It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
And then I'm sounding like some fella from Liverpool. All of a sudden, in a straitjacket.
You married?
Me?
You should get married, have kids. Pretty girl. I used to know lots of them back home.
Happy days.
Okay, and Paul, let's start with your chin down a little bit more, like he's a little lower than that. There we go. And
roll sound.
You want to take 5. And action.
Cut.
One more. It was a little bit too fast.
I do remember that, that we were always adapting to new material. Without, but that we're not the only movie that has done that. But it was the stakes were just too high to do that because our unit was so big, and we just had so many people on the payroll. We had so many, and we were it wasn't flexible because we had sort of shot our wide with set construction. But almost when I got there, there was almost like no money left in set construction.
The sets are fantastic. I mean, unbelievable sets. And some of the sets we worked on are huge, like 40, 50 foot high constructions. And the thing will look extraordinary. I know that.
You go onto the set and it's smoky and you see one of the actors in costume and makeup sort of standing by a wall. You're in the movie. Never mind the music and all the, the actual whatever it looks like on the screen, which is always different anyway, and the cutting and the editing. It's just it's already all there for you.
We're treading a difficult area here, an area that combines both some science fiction and the past. There are hints of, in certain things you can see some Art Nouveau influences and other things. We're really taking an old world and saying this is in the future sometime. It's rather like seeing medieval architecture today.
I actually have felt a great camaraderie with these particular actors because a lot of them, we have some mutual friends and they're we have similar trainings and stage experience, so I've actually felt more comfortable with this cast than with any of them.
I spent the third film watching Sigourney work a lot, just watching her. Even on my days off, I would come and just watch the way she worked because, needless to say, she was the veteran of the cast.
Your first line is what? What is it?
Well, you're telling me to come and get.
Yeah, so just give me a little bit of a moment so I can just sit on this guy holding this toothbrush going. So if you tell me they're coming to take it away, but fine, that's what we want. If they don't kill everyone, at least get rid of it.
You could have done many great Shakespeare plays with this group. You could have done any of them. And they all were very, I thought they were very loyal to Dave.
He is extraordinary, utter total confidence, which he inspires from the people that he works with.
I would never have thought it was his first film. And where he's placing the camera, I've never seen it done that way.
His ideas seemed very cinematic. Even then he'd joke, he said, yeah, this is a sort of Hitchcockian bit, and here comes John Ford. And so there are all these little nods, and it was a lovely energy, it was the energy of somebody confident and someone who was a fan.
Sliver at the bottom of the 65mm frame is the ground, and then it's mostly sky. So we would do the split so that along, like the first, if you imagine that pretty much just to the left of where the turquoise, the tent is. Right. Just to the left is where the left side of frame is.
I was a different person on Alien 3. I've never been as as tough in some way. I mean, I don't know what people remember me, but I knew I had to kind of like step up to the plate or just get buried. And I don't know if I got buried or not. I don't know what really happened, to be honest. All I know is, you know, I was part of figuring out what to shoot.
Not very good weather for this.
Dusk.
Yeah, but dusk in a blue sky means
No, it's
no
gonna
shoot.
it's supposed to rain this afternoon.
Okay, dusk in a blue sky means no shooting.
Yeah.
Okay?
Are we painting the sky?
No, no, no. Dusk in a blue sky. You can't paint the sky right along there. Okay, Ezra?
Gotcha.
We're cool on the concept now. We're all hip to this.
on
You
tape,
saw it
it's
right
on
here.
film. Dusk in a blue sky.
Ezra just
We'll
said,
shoot it anyway.
if it's a blue sky, we don't have to shoot. Right, Ezra? Hi, Joe.
Yeah.
I remember being with him and Norman and just, you know, it was like they just wanted to build stuff without sort of asking, you know? And I just said, I do draw the line there. And I remember having a real big fight with those guys about that. I mean, you know, my job is to make a good movie, but I'm not building sets that, you know, aren't in the budget, that aren't approved, you know? But it was that level of, you know, of like, you know, insanity.
That sort of thing. We've got a bigger one.
I don't think you need anything bigger than that.
No.
See it again?
We can play with it to get a different. Give it a bit of that.
It's a big Monty Python. That's fine. Yeah, that's better. You shoot 1,000 takes, but there's bound to be one that's good, right? See it again? I'd buy it. This blood's the wrong color.
The specifics that he was developing, like how the alien, you know, smashed somebody's brain open. I mean, that was incredible. You know what I mean? So those kind of things were going on a level that could sort of take you away from the macro problem and could take him away from, you know, we'd go in and we'd, you know, spend a couple hours with those boys, you know, doing, you know, how the tongue was going to smash open, you know, Charles Dance's head, you know, and, you know, watch it fail 3 times, then, you know, refine it. And, you know, I'll never forget Dave's, you know, his like complete devotion to the color of blood.
Is this Joss's blood?
No, it's personal blood, but it's...
Yes, it is.
It
fake
is?
blood, yeah.
It's a little browner, it seems. But, well...
I can put some more colour in it.
Yeah, I think so. I think you need to put a little brown in it. It's a little,
okay.
Ronald McDonald.
I want it richer from the head.
Yeah.
More
See again?
oxygenated, please.
So, you know, he got into his micro kind of, you know, obsessional stuff, and, you know, that kind of kept us moving.
Ooh, I like that one. Let's see that.
Yeah, better?
That's it.
Gets the job.
That's the one you want.
Yeah.
You know, those mechanical effects guys from London were unbelievable, you know, what they did. And, you know, and the marshalling for each shot of wind machines and doors opening and closing and smoke coming in. And, you know, that I learned a lot on that movie.
The thing with that movie is there were no weapons as such. So trying to create this mayhem with just fire was pretty tricky, but I think we did it convincingly.
Priorities of special effects, especially mechanical special effects, is always safety. You know, we always have to think how we're going to do the job without hurting anybody, and that's always the most important thought in our mind.
It was getting through the fire sequences as well as we could, safely. We had a couple of instances where things were quite tricky.
Yeah, there were a couple of injuries. No one, you know, no one was killed. I mean, no one suffered any life-threatening. But, you know, there was a fire thing that happened. You know, there was a kind of blowback through one of those tubes, and a couple of the special effects and fire marshal guys got burned. You know, they recovered, but yeah, there were a couple of things. It was a very challenging movie. It was a dangerous movie. And we were lucky more didn't happen.
She'll come through, it'll be dark, and then she'll come into this section of the lights.
Jordan Cronenworth, who I was a terrific admirer, he actually did Blade Runner, you know, with Ridley. Started the picture, and he got ill, you know. Like in the first week, it wasn't going well.
That's kind of just a sad story, to be honest. I mean, my view, first of all, I mean, he's the only person I've ever seen David have reverential respect for is Jordan.
I like that a lot. Yeah, can I get something through that window in there?
But wait till you see it sprayed down so it's balanced.
Okay.
My father had Parkinson's disease. He had it for 25 years, and I got there, and I understood it. You know, it's this very specific condition. It's not a general condition. And it has a trait that is really, really difficult, which is that you have huge swings of functionality, you know, and you can be almost fully functional, and then you can be like paralyzed, stiff as a board, unable to move. So I get there and I go, you know, Jordan's got Parkinson's disease. I mean, I didn't know it, you know what I mean? So I was going, whoa, you know, that, to add that to the mix.
You know, it would really be helpful to us if we could determine
exactly
the
where the master is.
parameters of the shot.
All right. Well, let's get a camera here.
The way these guys work now is that there's got to be somebody who's reading the light meter also. And there were things like crawling into, you know, the inside of a spaceship that's hanging from a crane, right, to get a reading. And, you know, and Jordan, when he was okay, he could go do that. But there were times when it just really wasn't possible. I mean, Jordan's eye never wavered. I think what it was just his ability to get out there and, you know, get all the readings he needed on these enormous sets.
I might see over as far as that is where the paper is.
That's for close up.
Right, I understand. But if that was out of the way, I would see the muslin, wouldn't I?
Yes, you would.
Okay. Well, that would be problematic. So we can't get the same effect without going a little bit harder, right?
David didn't just, you know, David didn't want like some overall light. He wanted, you know, variations and some hot spots and half a stop here. And, that's what Jordan does. So, you know, I think that's, you know, it was just physically very demanding.
So I think it was a mutual thing that they were a bit worried about him and he was a bit worried about himself.
No one was happy, but no, you know, even Dave, I mean, I don't remember him like, I think he could have stopped it in some way. I mean, you know, he stopped anything else he wanted to stop, you know. I mean, I think he also felt it might not even be safe, you know. I mean, it's just like climbing up ladders and climbing into corners and climbing into stuff, you know. It just might not be the right thing to try to go another 15 weeks on.
We ran Jordan's stuff that they'd shot so far, and I thought, Christ, I hope I'm good enough to match this, you know, because it was brilliant.
Alex, you know, was a major cameraman who really understood how to work there, how to work those sets. It certainly wasn't the same relationship, David and Alex Thompson, but I think David ultimately, you know, had a sort of general respect for the fact that this guy could light this scale of movie, was not at all intimidated by his ambitions. And, you know, I think there were times where Dave would be frustrated that, you know, the precision or the specificity of Jordan's gradations might not have been achievable anymore. But, you know, the movie on a whole still, I think, you know, looks great. Yeah, there's just some of those incredible Jordan moments that still shine through, but the rest of it doesn't look bad, you know.
The most challenging part of the shoot, I think probably the corridors, you know, because there's so much action in these corridors that led to that lead mine, you know, where all the lead falls down. You know, because tunnels are always difficult. You have to put a light at the end so it shines back, and then, you know, because there's nowhere to put the lamps. So I had to use little small units, quartz units, you know, that I'd hide behind the bulkheads and these sliding doors and things. But you could only shoot in one direction because you had to hide them. You couldn't have them shining back at you. So whenever we did the reverse, I had to take all the lamps and put them on the other side and so on. So that was a challenge, to make it get any shape and make the actors look good and so on. And to keep the requisite amount of mood in it, you know, because it's got to be fairly dark, otherwise people, you know, I mean, if you can see everything, there's no tension, there's no mystery, and there's no, you know, because you keep wanting to look in the shadows to see if the monster's there and so on.
Action! Yoo-hoo! Hey, fuck this! Come on, get me! Take your straight shot!
Going down those tunnels was terrific, I thought. I was surprised because we did it Steadicam, you know, and under crank to give it some speed and a sort of smoothness, really. And we shot it with a 10, because it was anamorphic film. We shot it with an unsqueezed 10mm lens, you know, which gave it that kind of strange distortion. And the Steadicam operator, Peter Robinson, came in, and he suddenly did this flip with the Steadicam equipment, and we said, "Wow, Christ, that's great! You know, can you do that while you're running?" And he said, "Yeah, sure, of course." And he started running, and then he twisted it, you know, and he got this upside down idea. It was lovely. It was, well, it wasn't lovely. It was quite scary, but at that time we were delighted, you know, because I'd never seen that done before. It was terrific.
Leave him!
We were shooting from the floor, so the ceiling became more important than the floor, which is the obverse of what generally happens, you know. I mean, normally you light from the top, or in the old days you used to light from the rail, you know, light from the top down. And now here suddenly you can't put any lights up there because they're all in shot, you know. But it's a style, and it really actually came off, you know. Of the four, I think Alien 3 is probably the most distinctive. I don't mean, I'm not pushing my own lighting, but the fact that it was all shot mostly from underneath made it distinctive, you know. It was different. And what amazed me, he conducted the whole unit from this monitor, you know. He used to sit in this monitor and look at the film, and they'd say, you know, via, well, just talking to the camera crew, you know, he'd say, move the camera left, push it in a bit, make a mark there. This is all through the monitor, you know, which amazed me. I'd never seen that before from a director.
And there were times where I had to do things that were very radical, like I shut down second unit a number of times. You know, we had a series of second unit directors come in. I don't know why this is what keeps occurring to me, but it was a big problem. And we had a video tab on first unit of the second unit stuff, and I just remember Dave once like either kicking the monitor over or, you know, just saying that, you know, that shot, I can't let them make these shots because they're going to get in the movie. Sometime I'm going to lose, and they're going to get in the movie. And he just said, you have to, you know, you can't let that happen.
I'd like A and B cameras on these, please. Can I see A and B? And action! Got it? What the fuck happened there?
The whole sort of basis of finishing on that schedule was based on a very productive second unit. It was just like, so I just went and I stopped it. You know, and it was like, and then we kept trying different directors. Eventually we got a couple who we got some good work out of, but it's just like his precision just doesn't really allow for that kind of second unit. You know, it's just like, he just affects every shot too much. You know, and he wants something out of every shot. And when he's getting a kind of a shot that's not up to that precision, it's like I swear it would kill me if I didn't do it, I think. You know, I mean, it was like, this was non-negotiable. But it was a big sort of part of, you know, not being able to just stick to a simple game plan. So, you know, my version of it was just, I need to just keep my eye on the ball and try to get us out of there with a movie. And, you know, maybe we go over budget, maybe we don't, but just let's get a movie out of You know, let's not stop.
I hope someone goes to see this movie.
There were some ideas that fell by the wayside, as there always are, that we were really looking forward to exploring. One of them was this, what we call the super facehugger, which was a facehugger that carried the embryo of the queen alien. And we designed it so that it would reflect the armor-plated exoskeletal quality of the queen, but transposing that onto the facehugger body design. It was really a beautiful thing, and it was cut from the film with the Bambi burster and ox sequence, and unfortunately I think it kind of was important to show that it was a queen alien that was inside Sigourney.
My recollection of the whole Bambi burster sequence was this, the whole set, the abattoir, the set with we had done this beautiful looking replica ox that's hanging up and split open.
Basically, what it is that there is an ox has died outside. You know, I think it was one of the oxes that was pulling the Ripley's EEV out of the water, and they bring it in and they're just going to slaughter it, and out of its belly, you know, comes this creature that is sort of like a four-legged chestburster. And the idea was to get across that whatever the creature gestates inside, it takes on some of the attributes of that host. So in this case, legs would be prominent. So it had very long, kind of spindly, Bambi-like legs, which is why Fincher called it the Bambi burster. We built a fake ox. We built stomach sections that could bulge and, you know, burst open with air cannons full of blood and goo, as well as a creature projectile that would come out in sort of a embryo kind of sack, you know, and hit the ground and then, you know, open up and stand there and, you know, do its thing. And then we also built a rod puppeted version of the creature that was able to take a few steps.
We were dressing all this stuff with the real guts that would come, you know, daily, would come from the butcher shop, and I just remember the smell of this place was just so overpowering. And we had this whole thing set up on a big long rod, and it all extended, you know, out the back of this ox carcass. So from camera point of view, it all made sense. But from the side, if you saw it from the side, it had the big long pole. And I remember at one point I was reaching up and trying to be blocked by this ox body and shove this pole through and have it come out and aim for the camera and not go off center, and take after take after take. It was excruciating, the smell and the heat from the lights just making the smell worse, and just trying to jam this thing through, and there were so many takes where it would come off slightly off center, it would just come out and kind of hang up here in space and bobble, and every time that happened we had to pull it back in, we had to redress the ox, we had to clean up the blood because we always had blood and guts and all this other stuff bursting out of it. So that was a huge ordeal. So to find out later that it was cut from the movie, you just feel like, wow, I had so much invested in that scene. So I'm dying to see the scene put back in.
We also tried a suit for a whippet. The suit looked great, but the dog really wasn't too thrilled about wearing the head.
Come on, sweetie, come on. Would you like some sponge? Come on.
A long time ago, David Fincher said that we should put a dog in a suit. Just for coverage, just for a shot. Quick shot in the dark, up real high, and the creature was running away, and it was in shadows, and everything would be fine.
He wanted us to get some unusual organic movement, just as Tom said, to help layer the effect.
Clash.
what we had to do is we had to cut the front half of the head out so the dog could see, and it was only good for shots from behind.
Oh yeah, that's gonna work.
It was so silly looking. I mean, it was the dailies were like you were on the floor because they were so stupid looking. I mean, and once in a while you do something like that it's just so dumb. I mean, I've done it many times. I mean, you know, you try an idea and it just sucks.
It didn't work as well as we'd hoped it would. It was sort of like the dog would kind of, walk kind of like he was, I don't know, a little bit spastic or something. We slimed him up too, and I don't know. The whole thing was it was funny, but it didn't have the desired horrific effect. So that one was never going to make it. But then anyway, when the scene was changed, we rebuilt aspects of it, built Rottweilers, same sort of pieces, but with a Rottweiler and a new Bambi burster. There were also some other effects in there that didn't quite make it in the way that we had hoped. There was a kind of a CAT scan of Ripley that I think is on a monitor in a shot, but it shows her internal organs as well, beating heart with a little queen alien embryo right nestled next to her heart, and it has a beating heart too.
We did 4 separate layers that were all keyed in, so we could lay the first layer down, which was the inside of the back with the back of the rib cage and the spine, and then we'd lay the next section in, which was internal organs, 1 layer of internal organs. Then we had a second layer of internal organs, which also had the little puppet of the embryo chest burster inside, tucked up right next to our heart. And then we had a top level which had the rib cage over top of that. So when all of these things were done in separate passes, then combined, Richard Hollander did a pass where everything was combined, and as the camera moved off axis, you got this wonderful 3D feel. And then the whole image was degraded down into monochromatic and given a kind of a digital feeling, so it was like some kind of a body scan readout that she was seeing.
It was a beautiful, beautiful shot, but it never really went in and showed you in the kind of detail that we had built into it.
And then we did a similar thing when they scanned her head. We didn't have a head cast of Sigourney Weaver at the time, so we had one of Meryl Streep, and we used that. So it was the first time we're admitting that we put Meryl Streep in Alien 3, but we had Meryl Streep's head, and then the skeleton face hugger over top of that, and then all the other layers again on top of that, which would give you the feeling that you're looking through multiple layers of tissue.
And there was a similar effect where with a CAT scan of a X-ray view of a face hugger tubule snaking its way down a human throat, and we did a real cool little tendril that had bladders in it and was transparent, and it was very, very organic and very creepy looking. But that one I don't think made it into the final cut in any form.
When Ripley brings Bishop back up, powers him up again, gets some information from him, that was probably one of my favorite effects, because we really got to take something that was a cool character, the Lance Henriksen character, and to do him in such a way that had not been done before as a total animatronic. And here's the talking Bishop. Well, the first aborted try. Boy, do we have some stories for you about that.
Tom and I really wanted to do it not as a makeup. We wanted to do an animatronic version of Bishop with his head caved in. We wanted to do something that you could not do with makeup. So we decided to say, all right, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be it's going to be a sculpture. It's going to be an animatronic, and it's going to take a close-up like this,
Fincher was saying, look at real stuff. Look at some of the most grisly things that are in the public's mind, and he cited the assassination of President Kennedy, the Zapruder film, as being a really horrendous image, and we took that to heart, and we incorporated that feeling in terms of the damage that's done to this character.
We didn't have a current head cast of Lance Henriksen, so we found one from Aliens, did a clay press out of that, and then Dave Anderson, who is our sculptor on that project, resculpted it to update it and you know, crush the head in and all that stuff.
We devastated a great deal of his head, but we still wanted to keep him recognizable. And we didn't do anything to his lips because we wanted his lips to be able to convey all of the emotion since there was so much damage to the rest of his face. And ultimately that made it a big challenge for us to articulate lips and make them move realistically.
We built one in London that was mostly cable operated, that didn't have the all the finesse that we really needed for the close-ups.
The first time out of the gate, honestly, when we did it in London, the results were not good. We didn't have the mechanical expertise at that time to get where we wanted to go with articulating these lips. And ultimately what we did when we were in London was the head that we created was shot, all the 2 shots of Sigourney and the animatronic head were captured in London. And then when we came back here to the States, we were able to go back and totally rebuild the whole face. And we moved to a translucent urethane skin. We had radio servos inside. We had one of the early motion control systems that were capable of recording playback of an animatronic character based on lip sync dialogue. And we felt that we got all of those beats down properly and actually locked in a performance of these lips, which sounds like such a simple thing, but the truth is, it was at the time it was a big thing. It was, you know, it had rarely been done before, and especially with the advances that we were trying to make in synthetic skins and the performance of the puppet, it was a big chore to pull off, and took some time.
Playback.
It's okay. Just a glorified toaster. How are you? I like your new haircut.
Got it. Very nice.
Sometimes the alien isn't in the shot when we're doing special effects shots, and they'll add in this remarkable, moving, slithering alien later. And I think those are the hardest shots because you're sort of, I mean, you ask the director, well, now, what's it going to do, and who's it going to look at, and what's it going to be doing, and how long, and how fast. And then you have to sort of basically imagine it. Luckily, those shots really aren't for us. They're to put the alien in, and we're sort of in the background. So theoretically, when we've needed an alien when it's on us, then, you know, an alien creature does come in and is off camera for us quite a bit of the time.
To make a rubber suit like this, we start off with a body cast of the actor playing the creature. In this case, it's Tom. And we, through various processes of mold making, we arrive at a fiberglass casting of the body of the actor, onto which we sculpt the form of the creature. And then we make a negative mold of that, and eventually we end up running foam rubber over leotards, unitard suits with zippers up the back. And then, of course, you know, the head goes on top of that, and the hands are separate pieces, as are the feet and the tail.
Okay, let's bring the mirror back that way so we can project a flatter shadow.
Sometimes David is just shooting shapes behind a plastic curtain or a shadow on the wall, and it's the actual cosmetic look is not very critical at that point. It's just getting the suit on so it's got the right silhouette, and that takes maybe half an hour. But if it's going to be you know, like a real beauty shot where you're seeing the creature, then we've got to start gluing down the hands and the feet, almost like a cosmetic blend. It has to be glued down, and then we stipple latex over the top of that and rub some of that off to give it the appearance of the sloughing skin. And the head gets glued down, everything gets glued down, and all of that, and fitting the head. If it's a cable-operated head, which has all the movement of the face and the jaw and everything, it can take up to an hour just to get everything looking the way we want it to look before we go on set.
We have several different heads for the adult alien, starting with the most crude and basic. We have our stunt heads, which essentially don't do anything but look good, and they're more flexible and so on, so there's nothing inside them that's going to shatter and injure a stuntman or Tom. We also have our expression head, which is a cable-operated head, which gives us all our snarling and drooling and the finer articulation. We have a radio control head, which essentially does the same thing as the cable head, although it's a little less refined. It is able to give us expressions without having to have cables trailing off of the creature for those shots where you need to see more of it and so on. And then finally we have the attack head, which is the head that does the dirty work, the killing and biting. It's a pneumatic apparatus that fires a heavy tongue, polyester tongue out of the head and punches holes in the victim's skulls.
I do have an odd relationship with the alien. I mean, Tom, the person who plays the alien, is a very funny fellow, you know, and a real wisecracker. And yet when he's in the suit, I've told him this, I just think he's brilliant. You know, I feel like he's become an actor doing this job because he's so in touch with this creature's, you know, I mean, they say that if you work from the outside in and you take on all the traits of someone, you become that person. That's one way of working on a role, and I think that's what's happened to Tom.
It's the final opportunity we have to present this thing on screen the way we really want it to look. We can sculpt this thing, design and sculpt a creature, and manufacture the pieces, and you put it on a stuntman, and it's out of your control. It may look good, but if it's not moving right or moving the way we intend it to move, you're going to lose the benefit of what we had in mind. So this is like the final chance. I'm in the suit, and Alec can stand back and look at it, and we've talked about the way the creature should move and the way it should look. It's like that's our final chance to tie everything up.
There was one scene where I confront the alien directly with my torch and everything, and I thought that Tom was very, I mean, considering the fact that he can't really see me, I thought he was really being very specific and good that day. And one time I went around the corner and I heard Fincher talking to Tommy. Apparently he could talk directly into this earpiece, and he was saying, "You hate that bitch, you hate that bald bitch, get her, there's that torch again, you hate that torch even more than her, all right, get her this time," you know, and it was like he was just whipping Tom into this lather of hatred, you know, and it was wonderful.
I know on the first, on Alien 3, the first time I put the alien suit on, and you're putting this thing on, it's just thin foam rubber, you're looking down, you're going, hey, the alien's got love handles. And we decided, you know what, for the next, you know, we didn't have to shoot for a couple of months. I'm just gonna eat crackers and vegetables, and that's what I'm gonna stick to. And so there was, that was the first time where I had to really kind of run backwards a little bit and try to get caught up with where I should have been.
More. More, get that. More head movement, Tom! Got it?
For Tom's vision and his breathing, what we did was we designed into the neck eye holes and air holes. Tom's head is actually in the neck of the creature. So, you know, you cut little holes, put some screen across it, that sort of thing. There really isn't the room in these to do the more sophisticated, you know, goggles and, you know, all that sort of stuff. Plus the slime and all that. You want to have as few electronics in the thing as possible.
And action. A little bit high, but still not bad, is it? Better. You're a little bit high.
Yeah, that's better anyway.
Bring him down. Whoa.
Yeah.
There have been times when I've been glued into suits for hours at a time, much longer than we would legitimately ask a stuntman or another performer to do, just because I'm just aware of every time you go in and out of the suit, there's damage done to the suit, there's wear and tear that's put on things, and I'm willing to go into things for you know, 8 hours, 10 hours. I think the longest I was ever in a suit, glued into a suit, was for a long 13-hour day from start to finish.
I gotta have the head like that.
Okay, he wants to face down on the floor, John. Just let him turn his head.
Yeah, but you're gonna have to reorient it so he can keep his face up and see what he's grabbing onto. You know what I'm saying? For the shadow.
Well, he's not going to be able to see. He will not be able to see. No, he cannot see.
Well, can we do this? Can we just...
What is it you're trying to get?
I'm trying to get the head at an angle like this.
And what else? Because we got the head at that angle, right?
Okay, but
Look,
we're gonna
look
be
down, Tom.
Yeah, I see.
And what does he have to see?
He's just gotta grab the guy and just like.
Okay, well maybe he can do it by feeling. You know, maybe he can
grab me. Okay, grab my head. Okay. Take your hands down now. Grab my head. Faster. There we go. And it's Okay, now head up a bit. Okay, now do the grab, and then he's gonna be holding him like this, and the guy's gonna be like that kind of stuff.
Do you want him on the rostrum, or is it fine?
We're gonna need him on. I don't know.
We had such a great relationship with Fincher that it made it very pleasant. He knows exactly what he wants. He communicates it very well, and he pushes you. You know, you look at his body of work and you say, okay, I've got to be up to snuff with what this guy does, and that's always a healthy thing. You know, I think you have to always want to excel. If you're just doing the same thing over and over again, then you're not improving, and you're probably sliding backwards, but you're not aware of it. So I think Fincher was very good at motivating, at least us, you know, to get the best out of us.
What I'm saying is, so we need to know it's a specific kind of death.
He says,
specific.
you want it on your feet or on your knees begging? In other words, do you want to be on the offensive?
But that's not the issue. The issue is we use ourselves as bait. That's the thing that's missing.
Okay.
Fincher was great. The way he talked, and the way he talked to actors, I was very moved by it, because this young guy is sensitive enough to sort of negotiate ideas with you and try to bring things out of you. But the way he did it was very, I thought, very sensitive and very smart.
The reason, from a purely narrative point of view, for this scene to exist is to see these guys' faces when we say to them, okay, you're no longer you're on the offensive, but you're no longer attacking this thing with any kind of rational, from any rational
But I
point of
think
view.
then
You
Moore
don't have
says, how are we
picks and
going to do
hoes.
that? And Kevin says,
They want to
I
use
know
this
what
as
they
bait.
want.
They want to use this as bait.
Yeah.
I remember the first day, and everybody was slightly nervous. You know, he kept all the time, make it real, it sounds a little too rehearsed, you know your lines too well. And he kept changing the lines on purpose so that you would be more real.
David knows exactly what he's doing. I mean, David Fincher is a genius, basically, for whom I would jump off London Bridge. I trust him implicitly.
David is, I mean, as you know, he's a young man. He's 28 years old, and he's been given $50 million to play with. And he really knows what he wants.
I'm smart enough to wait for some firepower to show up before we go out and fight the thing.
Right, okay, sit it on your ass. Fine.
Yeah, how about if I just sit here on my own?
No problem. I forgot. You're the guy who made a deal with God to live forever. And all the rest of you pussies can sit it out too. Me and her will do all the fighting.
Well, I think David has some good ideas, and he's certainly receptive to ideas.
I think he's a very, very talented man. It's like déjà vu for me, really, because it's like when I did the first one with Ridley. It was Ridley was the same. You know, they have this magic eye, which gives you fantastic pictures to work with.
Well, it's hard to have conversations with Fincher, really. I mean, I don't know what he's like now, because he's got a few films under his belt, but it was his first picture. And he's not the most communicative of people. He's rather like Ridley, you know, he's a bit monosyllabic, not in his thoughts, but in his words, you know.
We're waiting on one cable.
The cable, yeah. He's got most of it, but he needs some more.
Why don't we just poke a hole in the fucking wall right here?
He's up there now.
Oh, great. We're being held captive by more.
David was very awkward with the crew. In fact, I found the whole thing so unpleasant that I left on the first day of shooting. I prepared all the clothes, made all the clothes, and then told David to get on with it, because I actually found him very unpleasant to work with.
Okay, ready?
Rehearsal line, please. Let's stand by.
Get this guy out of here.
You can be a line producer with Fincher. You know, you can, but it's hard to be a creative producer with Fincher. you know, that role sort of becomes very, you know, difficult because he's not interested, you know, once he's shooting.
We had a big fight with Fincher during the course of the shooting, the we being Walter and me. You know, once we didn't really want to write the script because I've discovered once you write it, it kind of erodes your authority as producer. It just does. And in this case, since Fincher had never directed a movie before, we wanted to kind of keep a, you know, firmer hand with him. We were watching dailies, and we had a big argument about the character that Ralph Brown plays.
I'd done a couple of scenes when I got these very heavy script changes through, which made Aaron into rather more of a stupid character than he had been earlier.
I'd seen it at the read-through. I thought that this character is actually supposed to be funny. And I thought, everybody else is funny in this movie. Ralph, what's happened to Ralph Brown? Why isn't he funny? And Fincher had some theory about how he wanted to play him as being sort of the middle-class hero and, you know, this and that and the other thing. And I thought, well, not this guy. This guy is the dumbest guy in the movie. This is, you know. So this is when we wrote in, just to make sure that everybody knew where they stood about this character, you know, that they referred to him as 85.
His nickname is now 85, which stands for an 85 IQ. So then I had to think again about how I was playing it.
By this time, Aaron's got all their files, and he's going out. 82, 77.
So then it had to do with Ralph Brown's death. And, you know, he was supposed to get killed at a certain, you know, rather earlier moment in the movie than he does. And so when Fincher and I, we talked on the phone, and he wanted to do it a completely different way. We went to Fox, we said, look, if you do that, this will alter the whole plot. They agreed with us, and we said, okay, now look. When I leave this meeting, I'm going to go call Fincher, I said, and I'm going to go tell him this is the way it's going to be. Now then, he's going to call you, and what are you going to say? And they said, we're going to tell him, absolutely. Fine, okay. So then they called us back for a meeting the next day, and they decided that his emotional commitment to this part of it was so strong that they were, in fact, going to go with him. He said, well, look, then I am not going to go back to London, you know, because then if I can't have the say over the script, you know, for the director in the first time movie, then you guys call me in post-production when you're going to need me.
He hasn't acted like a first-time director, and I think that's one of the things that surprised Fox, because he isn't grateful for this amazing opportunity. He's not going, oh, yes, thank you so much, and I'll do whatever you say. He's sort of going, you gave me this job, and I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to do it the best I can, and if, you know, you're going to have to work with me. And I think that attitude also has been very inspiring, because these movies are very expensive, and to a certain extent, I think the studio does want you to make the best film you can. But they also feel that these are science fiction films, and those of us who make these films are always trying to make a different kind of film than that.
Actually, Fox got a bit upset with David because it did take so long.
Action!
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7.
And cut it! Cut it! When? Too late on the mirror.
Once again,
Far too late on the mirror. And it was jerky. Let me see that one back. Play it back for me really quickly.
We were doing a lot of takes. We were, you know, we'd do like 12 or 15 takes quite often. And then David would be satisfied with that, and then Sigourney would say, I don't know about that last one, whether I can do better, you know, and David would say, okay, we'll try it. So then we'd do another 15, you know. This is why I'm so full of admiration for David, that even as a debut director, he still had this vision, and he was going to try and get it if he could, you know. Even so, the big guns at, you know, at Fox were saying, come on, hurry up, it's only an alien film, it's not, you know, not Gone with the Wind, it's not Lawrence or Arabia, for Christ's sake.
I suspect there were apprehensions about David Fincher's ability to make it work because he'd come from the commercial world, and I think that was an unfair pressure on him, actually, because he's very clever and his commercials are visually wonderful. So I do think he suffered from that. I think the studio probably were down on his neck a bit, and I think that's one of the reasons he was probably aggressive with a lot of the people around him, because he was feeling a lot of pressure from the studio and the producers.
I don't know what the collective noun for producers is, but, you know, phalanx, a wodge,
but there seemed to be these characters moving around, particularly when Fincher was there, moving around, moving around the floor in unison, watching him or watching us.
Well, I think the big problem is that he had to be essentially his own producer. And so after this endless day of doing very demanding filming, he would have to get on the phone like at midnight and talk to the brass at Fox, and they'd be saying, "Don't shoot the next day. We want to cut that." I felt it was quite arbitrary, and again, it all arose from him not being with the script.
I think the biggest problem David had was that we never had a concrete draft of a script to go by. And here he is directing his first movie, following in the likes of Ridley Scott and James Cameron. And, you know, it is very difficult to balance all of those things. And I think that when you go through any production, it's difficult, it's hard. I think when you go through your first one without a script, it's even harder.
It's amazing to me that Fox is the #1 studio in the country because they're all such a bunch of morons.
I'm not as clear-cut about who was fucked and who wasn't, and because David was so initially in such an untenable creative position, but his sort of rage against the sort of, you know, Fox machinery, you know, sort of seemed to me to be like in place when I got there. So it was like I didn't have a chance on that front. You know, I just sort of just watched that.
When I left, Landau was he was their man on the spot.
I was the executive vice president in charge of feature production at 20th Century Fox. In my responsibilities there, I oversaw the physical production of the movies we produced.
He doesn't do that job anymore. And, you know, everyone who takes on that job, you know, which is sort of going from being, you know, sort of usually a top-of-the-line producer to being the head of physical production at a studio, tries to invent a way to do it. My sense of when John got that job was that he really got very ambitious in his vision of his ability to do it. And they were both young. I mean, Landau wasn't much older. That's probably an interesting part about it.
He was tough. He was very tough. And he wasn't going to, you know, take this bullshit from Fincher, and that was that, you know.
You know, there was a point where I guess they really felt they were in trouble with Fincher. You know, Fox, you know, that they didn't know if they were going to get a movie. They were spending millions of dollars. He wasn't respectful of their agenda. He was openly contemptuous at times, you know, and of very, very major executives in this business, you know. And I guess John was just given the mission to break him, you know, to break that. You know, we can't tolerate that. It's our money, you know, and you're going in there, kid.
I think one of the things that happens in every production, there are heated moments. And I think that unlike music videos, unlike commercials, feature films are shot over a much longer period of time. And whereas you might never reach a point on some of those shorter shoots, on a 100-day, 80-day schedule, you go through a lot together. And just like in any relationship, there are conflicts, especially in a creative process, where people don't necessarily see eye to eye. It doesn't mean that any one person's opinion is wrong. And you could have very heated conversations. And, you know, I think as a studio executive or as a producer, it's your responsibility to bring up those things that are sometimes hard to hear.
It was about money, pure and simple. You know, he'd want to do something that said, it's too expensive, you can't do that. You know, that's all it was.
You know, Fincher tended to keep most of his, you know, the tribulations from upstairs, all the trouble that was going on behind the scenes, such as it was. He kept it from us. He did confide more, I know, I've learned later, in Brian Glover. He was closer to Brian. And Brian was, you know, Brian was lovely and experienced. And I think he kept Fincher's, you know, morale up as well, you know. Because you forget how young he was, David, you know. And for all the, for all the bravura and bravado and youth and the energy in the world, when you're getting day in, day out, I think the kind of grief that he was getting, not just the pressure, I think he did fantastically well just to keep a smile on his face.
David was put in a really difficult situation. When you're a first-time director, you don't have a lot of the controls that you have after you establish yourself. And I think that from a directorial standpoint, the situation David was put in could not have been more frustrating for a director.
This is one of Dave's lines to me. We were in a meeting in his office, and he gets Landau on the phone, and they have some ridiculous, moment, and he takes this knife, and just like stabs it into his desk, and just like rips, this desk apart. I was like, it's like not sort of a nice desk. I was like, holy Jesus Christ, what am I into here? And then I said, Dave, the difference between you and me is that, I kind of like people and sort of start with a kind of acceptance of them. And he said, no, I like people, they stack well,
So, Captain, you want to tell us what you're looking at?
I don't know. Is this for the opening or for the end?
That'd be a good shot if he was back there looking through the hole.
Yeah, there you go. That's my Starlog shot.
Right. We could do that.
One of the things that David did throughout the production is push the visual style. If you look at the scenes in the car, or if you look at the design of the alien and what David wanted it to be, a freight train meets a Jaguar with a speed and an agility that we had never seen in any of the alien movies. And this enabled him to do things with the camera that could not be done in prior movies. The alien running across the ceiling, all these different things. And David was always pushing that and pushing people to go beyond what they would expect their own capabilities to come up with unique and different techniques.
That was one of the challenges of the production, that is to come up with a technique of shooting the alien. How would we shoot the alien? How would we create the alien in this movie? Nobody had ever seen the alien running in the way that he was running. Runs on the ceiling, on the side, all over the place. We had to develop a look. How does an alien look when it runs?
From a practical standpoint, the idea of putting a man in a rubber suit, it works because you get the coverage you need and you have something to work with on set, and the actors have something to work with. A lot of this movie is going to be a third-scale puppet. I mean, in fact, we're hoping that most of the time that you see the creature, it's going to be the puppet, because it's just got things to it that you can't do with a man in a suit.
There's always a size when you're dealing with puppets that you want to strike, which is the right size, because gravity is one of the problems that you're dealing with in trying to coax life out of rubber, which is basically the task. It was a very difficult project to get the alien to look menacing and terrifying in motion. Stop motion is too jerky. I mean, that's out of date. I mean, you can't have a character running in the scene without the natural motion blur that you'd expect to see, and it's because it looks herky-jerky. So that was, not a useful approach at all.
I had worked before with a guy back on the first Star Wars. His name was Lane Liska. And he was very good at stop-motion animation. And we wanted to take the idea of that and use that with rod puppeting, but be shooting it with the motion control cameras. So Richard coined this frame of Mo motion, and I don't remember why it was Mo, but it was Mo motion.
It's going to be a rod puppet that's composited through a blue screen, so we'll have more control over the movement, and we'll be able to go in and remove control rods frame by frame, rotoscoping things out, and really getting some control over the movement that way.
Fincher wasn't going to buy locked off shots, I mean, not in these kind of ferocious scenes, and so we designed the system that we could pan, tilt, dolly, boom, all these things.
We shot live action footage in the tunnels and in all the sets back in England with what we called a field recorder dolly that Boss Film had made. And this was a dolly that was built so that the camera could be on it and moved by the first unit people, and the kind of wheels and control arms for panning and tilting and booming and cracking in and out were familiar to a regular live action cameraman. But while all this was happening, we had recorders on all the wheels and all the different axes that would be able to record all these axes. We would bring them back to Boss Film.
And we would put that same motion file back into our motion control camera here, which would be modified to take in the scale changes. So the dynamic distance would be scaled down to, say, 1/3 of their actual motion. The track length would be 1/3 as long. The boom height would be 1/3 as high, except all the angles on the pan and tilt remain the same. So you take all that information and then you shoot the alien with that same program, and then you can put the alien as a separately photographed creature into another scene.
One of the things that I was involved in was, it was a little bit backwards, but we had to retroactively figure out how much the alien would have moved on the set, on the full-size set, and then scale that down. And so I had to go and from figuring out what lens they had used and knowing what the view, the field of view and height and width of that lens was, figure out where they were on the set so that we could start some of these setups and know how far to move the puppet through this thing. There were things like that that didn't get documented like they might have been because nobody had ever done this before.
We also developed a LaserDisc composite system so that we could take the material that was shot at 1 frame a second or 48 frames a second and reconfigure that to 24 frames a second so that we could then put it with the background and see immediately after we shot a take on the stage, we could then composite it in video with the background and see if it works. If he's supposed to be noshing on a particular actor and he misses it, then you can see. So you then move him over and he does this over here, or his feet placement and all that kind of stuff can be controlled. And it was a really powerful tool, and it's never been able, nobody's ever been able to do it with such facility without this equipment. So this was all equipment that had to be designed, built, and foolproof and perfect, you know, because the responsibility was on us, you know, in time to shoot it. So it's tough.
I know that for Lane and the guys that were actually doing the puppeteering, to be doing it in that slow motion as the camera is doing the move, there are some shots where a camera comes around and turns a corner and goes into a hallway and sees the alien eating this guy that's on the ground, and or maybe the alien comes off of the ceiling and goes down. And so we had to be able to get everything coordinated just right, and the puppeteers in the right position and the alien in the right position without having any of that set there. It would have been far too costly to build miniature sets and far too constraining to have 5 guys with rod puppets, or with these rods going to the puppet, if those walls were in the way. So we had just a few fixtures that would represent perhaps one plane of the wall or one plane of a table or a doorway, but these guys were coming at this puppet from every angle except from where the camera was seeing.
Yeah, I think the knees do give us the kind of cockpit kind of feel to it. Yeah, you just got to be really cautious of those plants. Make sure to hold the plant on the foot as long as possible. When you're bruised, then you know you're doing it.
oftentimes David, who was involved in each shot, would get the puppeteers all going to a point to where they were just barely in control of the creature. And if they had to move any faster, they'd have been just bumping into each other. And by achieving this kind of, it's like the Wile E. Coyote going around a corner and skidding on one level, but what it achieved was the occasional serendipitous action that made the alien have a character and made him, or it, terrifying. From the standpoint of our task on Alien 3, we had to create the alien, but we also had to help create the environment. So there are numerous miniatures and matte paintings we did, one of which was the furnace set, which was a pretty nice kind of, I don't know, Blade Runner-esque shot.
The idea of that whole set came up rather late in the production. And I remember it being a really low amount of money that they had left to do this. And we're going, oh my gosh, how are we gonna carry this off? It can't be a matte painting. A matte painting won't have the depth, and Richard didn't want it to be a matte painting. Richard Edlund wanted to have something that had depth, and we could have the fog moving through and painted almost in layers. So we came up with a forced perspective set, and we always called it the cardboard set, because it was going to be something we knew from the start that had to be just really knock down, drag out, pop it together real fast, and have some fun with it, but mostly cardboard and foam core, and use more shadows and inferred detail than really building a lot of detailed stuff for it. That was a fun set to work on.
So this is what you run that big camera with, eh? That big camera boom. Camera's not so terribly big.
Well, that's because we don't have the magazine on it right now.
We built a miniature emergency escape vehicle that was built into the sides of the Sulaco, such that there were a number of these to suggest that there was a much larger crew at one time on the Sulaco. And then we built I think it's about a 3.5-foot EEV, and then a much larger, about a 12 or 16-foot wall piece that we would shoot motion control against blue screen and have the capsule in slow motion. An arm would come off of it and it would fall back away from the camera and then go off to the side. So we had broken the shot up in such a way that we would first see the EEV come out, and it would go out of frame, and then the camera would go through that same hole, and as the camera would turn and pan on the stars, we would start to see the edge of Fiorina, the planet, come into frame, and that was a matte painting. And then we'd once again acquire the EEV pulling away from us and going off towards the planet. And so that was another motion control shot of the EEV in a different position further away.
This is Fiorina. It was supposed to look very toxic, so I played around with toxic materials to make it.
It really was.
And I used razor blades and all sorts of tools to get texture. And then this had to be so large because they had the miniature coming in and turning to crash. Yeah. And she lands right here in that area. So that area is actually painted tighter. And this, I was picking up some of the plate color in these rust tones. And I remember doing that, looking at the plate. And that's why the rest of it is very loose.
They shot the EEV. It was supposed to be burning up. And again, this was way before, but quite a bit before digital compositing. And I remember the guys had all these cool tricks. They were painting the edge of the tailing edge of it with ultraviolet paint. So when they put ultraviolet light on it, it would actually glow from inside. Really pretty neat. The EEV coming down, that was the one digitally composited shot. They actually animated the little EEV. I think that was hand animated. And then the light coming through the clouds, they were taking the clouds that I had painted and kind of reversing them out so that whatever was dark in the clouds, he made them turn reverse and become light. So as the EV was on fire coming through the back of the clouds, it looked like it was glowing from inside.
There's another thing that we built as a miniature that didn't exist in the live action sets, and that was this crane arm that was going to be used to pick up the EEV and be moving it through the wind and setting it down. And I had a guy working for me that had worked for me on and off for a number of years, John Eves, and I said, "Hey John, you want to build this crane?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, I'd love to do that." And what he did was he had a model kit of an X-Wing, and he used the body of the X-Wing as the main body for this crane.
This is called Can You Find the X-Wing?
We ended up having to build one of these in scale to the EEV. So we ended up building, in essence, a 14-foot long X-Wing body to be holding this thing up.
That shot was done with painted background, miniature foreground, and a big miniature crane arm. And in order to give it scale, because the audience doesn't know how big anything is yet, and to also give it a sense of reality, we put a couple of people up on top of this miniature escape pod by projecting them on little pieces of cardboard and separate passes. And so they run as silhouettes, and their capes are flowing in the breeze. And those little touches kind of give the eye a sense of relief and believability.
For my taste, it was a little too sharp-edged. Maybe there was a matte line. It was kind of hard to tell because there's a lot of CG junk and dust and garbage kind of blowing through the shot. But I know that the background was shot slightly out of focus to look like it was in the distance, which for my taste was a little too much of an effect, because I would expect to get that on a wide-angle shot, but this was essentially made to look like a 1,000mm lens. You'd never get a focus shift from foreground to background in a lens that wide, and for me, it really you kind of noticed it. If you look real close, there's a because we did this show at Boss Film, which of course was EEG, which is where they did Blade Runner, and so right back here, I've got my homage to Tyrell Corp. You can see the big towers off to the side.
One of the fun things that we did with David was there's a shot of a cross made out of found objects on this planet, out of old rusty found I-beams and metal and stuff like that, and it's in this junkyard. And David had an idea of kind of proportions of a cross, and he could tell us, well, it should look like it's been made out of all these found parts, and there's sort of a religion, I guess, that the inmates on this planet kind of create. And we were having a hard time, though, really getting a drawing or a sketch or anything that would convey what this cross would look like. So to make it fun for the model makers, I said, and everybody wanted to do this cross because everybody wants to do anything that's going to really show up and be what we call a hero prop on the set. There were 4 different guys that wanted to do it. So I said, you guys, each one can build a cross on your own time. We'll show them all to David, and he can look at them and make any changes. And the one that gets picked, you get paid for it, but the ones that don't, you just had the fun of doing it. And so that's what we did. We built 4 different crosses that were all kind of overall the same proportions, but just slightly very different variations, some more rugged, some more hacked out of stuff, but he had fun with that too. He really liked the idea of getting to choose, and not having to be so tied down like usually we made him do.
Wait for the fucking signal!
Some things you'll never see that we built, and they were for a good reason. There's a shot of this flame front running through the corridors, and you have an up angle on Sigourney and another man real close, and they turn around and they see this flame blasting through the corridor. Well, they couldn't afford to really do this. It would be much too close to the actors to have this kind of flame. If it was a stunt person, you might have them in the background, and you do later on in the scene see stunt people in flames, but you couldn't get that close to the actor with the real flames. So what we did was we got the draftings and the blueprints of the corridor, and we made a 1/3 scale corridor. And we made it with all the major indentations, the major structure of that whole thing. But it was all painted black without detail. And the reason was we could do a fire gag in miniature and shoot it at high speed and blast this fire through the corridor and just shoot that, the same kind of up angle we measured where the camera was on the live action set, and got the same perspective and everything. And then we had the flame front go through that miniature set, and then when we took the two pieces of footage, the live action and then this flame front that is basically exposed so that you're only seeing the flames and the fireball from it, with the live action and bringing up lights on the characters, you'd swear that that flame front's coming right through that corridor. I mean, you see it. I even see it now and think, oh, that worked out pretty nice.
And there are shots that work, and there are shots that don't work so good. I mean, I look back on it now, and some of it looks a little funky to me. And there were sequences where we had planned to rod puppet certain aspects of the character on the set, and we tried doing that at one point. The problem, but then you would have to remove. It's like the bunraku style, where you have the guy behind the puppet moving the puppet with rods, and then you have to lose the guy, and you have to do that with moving split screens and rotoscope, and in the photochemical world, it was, you couldn't do split screens as seamlessly as you can digitally.
This was before we were using computers to composite things. Matter of fact, this was one of the first jobs that Boss Film used computers to do any work with film. Usually everything had been done chemically before. And I think that Alien 3 was still composited chemically, but I think we put shadows in of the alien creature onto the walls in CGI, in computer.
Yeah, the shadow elements were, for the most part, CG with some roto help from, simple, regular old rotoscope help. The one computer-generated shot is they had to model the head of the alien, which was not that difficult because it was basically kind of like an oblong football shape. And since we were looking at it from the top, we wanted to see the cracks, so they modeled the character and then did a computer animated crack, and it was like on the screen for maybe a second. So that was our first computer generated and digital composite. So it was all done digitally.
It was just the start of this whole big wave that became CGI, of computer-generated imagery for Boss Film.
I mean, it's so easy to do it digitally and so difficult to do it photochemically. I mean, just to get a good matte, so you don't get you have a scene where the edge characteristic of the creature that you're matting in, it looks right, and it doesn't look too sharp, or it doesn't look too fuzzy, or it doesn't, have a black line on it, or whatever, I mean, just to get a composite without matte lines is a real feat in the photochemical world. In the digital world, it's like simple. That's automatic, So I mean, I'm very happy to have been delivered from the sumo wrestling world of photochemistry and effects.
I think there was a lot of tension, especially towards the last few weeks of shooting in London. David was a slow shooter then. I don't know whether he's different now, but he was then. But I mean, for good purpose. I mean, these results were good, and it were very difficult sets to work in. And I think that was the problem, that he was being pressurized to go faster and faster. And that's one of the reasons that I think we finished the shoot there without completing all the scenes.
The end of the film was very confusing for everybody because, from memory, again, it did seem that we were going to finish the film, we were going to conclude everything, and then it got to the point where it seemed that that wasn't going to be the case. So then we ended up having to decide, at what point do you say goodbye?
As we said, Saturday we'll probably be coming back, and then yesterday I heard they're going to finish with this footage. That's the game plan. I want to see how they're going to do it.
It was unclear how we were going to end the shoot. And I think the deal was that we had to get back, we had to get out of London. It was like a hemorrhage situation. We were doing very small things with a huge, it was like, I think the idea was that we had to stop. We didn't wrap the film. We stopped shooting.
I think we all recognized that we had holes in the movie that we needed to fill. Again, because we did not have a script going into the movie. And rather than staying in England and continuing to try and fill those holes, the studio made a decision to bring the production back to LA, take a period of time off where you can assess what is needed and go back and more surgically fix those holes. No one left England thinking that the movie was finished. We left England knowing that we had more work to do and that we were going to give David an opportunity to edit the movie, look at the movie, and determine what he needed.
They said to me, would you mind coming to the States to finish the cut now? And it would take 6 months. I said, fine, no. So we get there, and of course we haven't completed the shooting. So the first thing to do is to get the film all together and let the studio see it.
So sure enough, the movie goes way over. He comes in, he shows us a 3-hour version of the movie, which doesn't play very well. And now a vast, reshoot, redo, and cutting process goes on. And, these are clearly never pleasant scenes, and this went on for a while.
When I got to Fox in Los Angeles, they ran the film for the American crew that were going to do this extra shooting. And I was in the theatre with them, because that was then the first time I'd seen an assembly myself. And when the lights went up, there was, quite a bit of silence. Nobody actually said anything.
I saw the rough cut of the film, uncut. And there were some scenes in there that were pretty gross. There was an autopsy scene on the girl that I like certain gore in films, I do it, and it made me sick. It really grossed me out, and I remember that people got up and left, walked out of the theater at the time, and I was just saying, this will never be in the film. They can't show this stuff. It was just too much, I thought. And when the film came out, it wasn't in the film.
The dog burst was, that was quite gory. I remember when the first cut on that.
That's back
when
from
he
our
was
animals
sitting there
now.
shaking. That was like the Rottweiler or whatever. I can't remember.
Yeah, Rottweiler.
Rottweiler
Yeah.
was shaking and doing all that. And we actually had that thing come out and flop on the floor. And man, we went nuts on that sound. And it was all, everybody went, whoa, this might be too much for people, so they cut it way back.
We went into it knowing that we were looking at a work in progress. It was almost like a live reading of a book where you get the audience's reaction to know. So we went through that and we got the answers we needed.
So David and I said, well, what we needed, say, A, B, C, D, E, and F, these particular things, and then we'd have a meeting. They'd have these endless meetings to discuss what we should do. And then they would say, fine, we've now decided you can do A, E, and F, or something, missing all the rest out. We said, well, it really won't work, but no, we'll do that. So we do that, put them in, show again, and they realised what was missing was needed. That's the reason this thing got held up all the time, because the decisions were slow in being made, and then when it came down to the editing process, we had all these arguments.
They ended up shooting 6 more weeks, so, or 5, you know, they shot a lot more, so it wasn't like they didn't give him a chance to ever do anything else, you know.
It did take a long time to set up. They did take some months to set up this, you know, the additional shooting. And I do know that it was problematical because, you know, Ripley had a shaved head, and you know that was hard. She didn't want to shave her head again.
She didn't like having to have her hair cut off like that because it took so long to grow back. And she had an agreement with the producers that if she had to have her hair cut off again like that, she would get a $40,000 bonus. And the producers, oh, we're sure of it. We know what we're going to shoot. All of this. Well, they ended up changing things, and sometime later, Sigourney had to come back, and we did this shot. And instead of putting that much money into a bonus for her, I think for about $16,000, they had a beautifully handmade scalp piece that had all these very short little hairs in it. So it looked like she had been shaved, but her hair had been growing out a little bit during this time.
Shaving somebody's head and putting a bald cap on is one thing, and it's very hard to do on a woman to begin with. But to have stubble embedded into the bald cap, I don't think it had ever been done. I flew to New York, took a head cast of Sigourney. We made a foam bald cap, and then a friend of mine, Stuart Artingstall, punched every hair into the head. He worked about a week on it, 8 days, I think, the first time. 12 hours a day, just punching hair into this head. Then trying to get the bald cap on was in itself the most difficult makeup I've ever done in my life, because with the hair punched in, it had a preordained hairline in it. So if you moved it a 1/16 of an inch in any direction, it completely threw off the hairline. Trying to get that down and then trying to get it, because foam would stretch, and trying to get it around the ears right and everything, it just was a nightmare. And to everyone's amazement, it worked. She shot the scenes. I remember when I saw the film, I couldn't tell.
Ripley! It's burning hot! Hit the sprinklers! Gas the fucker!
I told him at the time, I'll never do this again. I'm glad you got the shot, you know, I'm glad it worked. I'll never do it again. So another month goes by, I get a phone call. Oh, we're shooting a whole new ending to the film.
We had a big fight about the ending, too, of Alien 3. This thing where Sigourney goes into the fire, struggling with the beast, the chest burster, was a real last-minute thing, and Fincher resisted it heavily.
The ideas about how the movie was actually going to end had been up in the air and moving back and forth, and we kept getting different boards and hearing different stories about whether the chest burster was going to come out while she was up on top and she would grab it and take it and go over the edge, or whether she was even going to go over the edge or not.
I thought that if we went out, we sent her off with a kind of real signature, alien signature, pregnant with this thing, struggling with it as she takes it to its death, that would be fairly strong. And he'd agreed to it at one point, and then there was a whole big quandary because we'd heard that the Terminator ended with the guy falling into the lead, same sort of deal. We thought, oh God, oh no. So that's when we thought, well, if she goes out struggling with it, that's so alien that no one's ever going to accuse us of, because the Terminator 2 hadn't come out yet, but we'd heard that it had this thing in it.
The penis that popped out of her stomach, right, it's like,
yeah.
It was, we got some laughs out of it, but again, we're not the writers, we're asked to do something. And
that one thing that bothered me is I still don't like the optical effect of her falling in the fire. The fire to me just didn't work when she does her backflip.
My feeling for that was it was a rush to finish, and I felt they were shortchanging themselves. I don't think the final visual of that was anywhere near what it could have been.
David was hurt by this film, I think. It was, you know, being your first film, and he's an extremely talented man. I'm sure it knocked his confidence, because there you were, given the opportunity to do this big picture, and then they were taking it away from you.
Yeah, I remember he would come in for dailies at least a couple times a week, and you know, he'd sit in dailies, he'd give his comments and you know, what we should fix, what we shouldn't fix, and what was working, what wasn't working. And there was always this person who was kind of trailing along behind, who was the studio watchdog. And this person, I kind of remember it was a woman who would basically kind of hang out after dailies were done and say what we could and what we couldn't work on based on, you know, what this person thought was appropriate. And it was, of course, that was just based strictly on budget and money. It wasn't based on what really needed to be done for the film. For the director, that's got to be incredibly frustrating. You know, you're just trying to make your movie, and you know, the thing that was kind of strange was there was never a discussion with him about priorities. Like, you know, I really want this done. It was just like, no, you can't do that. I remember one day he just kind of came in to the matte painting department because he used to shoot matte paintings, and we were just kind of talking one day, and he was telling me this whole kind of story about how difficult it was for him. I think finally before the show ended, he left, just walked off and said, "That's it, I'm done."
I just think it's a shame because he got more and more depressed when we were working on it, because everything we try and do, it would be negated by somebody or trod on by somebody, and it was usually trod on by the people who had the least talent.
They wanted to shorten the movie. I take a half hour out of the movie. I think it had to do with how many times they show it in theaters, so how much popcorn they sell and all that kind of stuff. And I think they were afraid of Fincher's yearning to have the movie be on other levels other than just the fear level and the action level. What David was after was something that was very significant in the sense that when there's no meaning and there's no spiritualism, and you know that the odds are stacked against you, how do you cope in that environment? And the studio was afraid of it.
We were, well, just over a year in editing, weren't we? I mean, it was a long time. That was from after we'd got the film cut, assembled. We were a year. So it was a long time, that picture. And the thing is, and when it came out, it didn't have what it should have had in it, which was a shame, because all that effort was wasted because of bad decisions.
I know David did have to scale back his vision for budget reasons, and I know that there was more on the surface of the planet planned.
Okay, let's get Stunt Ripley in here. Okay, watch behind you guys. Bringing in Mr. Lincoln.
The EEV was something that had already been designed, and in fact they had built a full-size one in England that they were going to be, for one part of it, dragging up the beach. And there was an establishing shot where these oxen were pulling it up the beach from the water. And I believe that never made it into the film.
I think it made a major difference to me because the thing is, the beach scene set up these inmates and set up the environment, and the fact that the doctor was a loner. He was there, and all those things were very important, and the fact that you saw the way they worked, and it was very sort of barren, and it was like it was just these odd moments they could get outside, and that they used like Stone Age type gear. All those scenes at the front were invaluable to the film. To see her brought into the place, you saw what it was like, you saw all these bugs and all this other stuff that was, it just set the whole place up and what it was, and we never had that.
You know, I think that there are several sequences that were filmed, as they are on any movie, that don't make it into the final product of the film. I think one major sequence was a sequence where they actually captured the alien in a room, and it was for one of the prisoners to go down and let the alien out and free the alien. And it was shot, and it worked great.
Catching it and letting it go. I mean, I can't tell you to this day why that edict came down, that we got to lose it, because we fought for it endlessly.
In the context of the whole of the movie, when you take this mythic creature and you're able to contain it, it loses some of its threat. And I think that's what David ultimately realized and made the decision to pull that out and shoot around it and make it work, and I think it's an improvement to the movie.
Having caught that alien when they did catch it made all the next half of the film more powerful, because you knew it was going to come out, but you didn't know when. It was the same, it's the whole logic with the alien thing. You never know when things are going to happen. And then losing this Golic character, letting it out, it was mindless.
The Golic character in the movie was much more important because he associated himself with the alien as almost a fiery angel of death.
They wanted Golic, first of all to wig out, strike somebody, then he breaks out of this hospital, runs amok, goes to find the monster, who by this point is trapped. They've incarcerated this monster, and he's meant to release this monster, team up with the thing, and go and kill Ripley. Fantastic! I'll take the part. Most of that stuff has disappeared, I think. I've had friends say, in fact, we saw you in one scene and then you kind of disappear. Nobody knows quite where you disappear to, which is a bit of a mistake.
I think it was a great film that got lost. I think that people, the Alien fans out there, and I'm sure there's a lot of them still, have never had the opportunity to see what David's vision was for Alien 3. Hopefully that will be put right now, and I think it could be as classic as the first.
I got involved with Alien 3 when David Fincher became interested in my work. I think my theater work and more experimental things that I was doing. I got started developing sounds with samples from found objects, whether it's scissors or stretched piano wire or what we call a steel cello, or different sounds that I brought, sort of a grab bag of sounds I brought to Pinewood Studios for David Fincher to listen to and to sort of turn him on about, this is a great sound to be associated with the creature, and this is a great sound to be associated with a room, for example, that you don't want to go into. I don't think it was necessary to emulate or even refer to the earlier scores. I remember enjoying the movies in the theater, but during the process, I wanted to just think of it as a complete separate entity, and so did the director at the time. Fincher wanted the feeling that you were completely fucked as soon as you were into 5 minutes of the movie, that there was going to be no hope completely. And my whole thing was that to provide a frightening backdrop and atmosphere is not the difficult part. The difficult part is to try to remind the people who are taken to this place way, way out in space and on this prison colony, that there's Earth. So when you see the little girl, when we find her dead earlier in the movie, there's a little music that's played on the piano, and it's kind of, that reminds us of a domestic setting on Earth.
Forgive me.
There's melodies that might remind one of a certain feeling of compassion and religiosity. I used Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, as a metaphor in the beginning to basically that these were the lambs going to slaughter, and the only option they had was a kind of a, even if it was self-created spirituality. Fincher was thinking of the music as almost the sound of the movie, that it wasn't music as recognizable orchestral themes. I think what Fincher was after was something, at least with me, was something very textural and sonorities, to where the line between quote-unquote sound effects and music was completely blurred. The most difficult thing about my role in that movie is that a good 70% of the whole movie, as it was cut finally, turned out to be a chase. You know, usually the quote-unquote chase sequence in a Hollywood movie is the last 10%. But this time it was like 70%. People running down corridors, running through halls, down steps, etc., etc. So that was my biggest challenge, how to constantly change the texture so it didn't become boring. Well, there were two endings in the movie, and David opted for the darker ending, and the studio were pushing him for a quote-unquote Hollywood ending, which had more hope and heroism. And I remember I had finished the score. It was, going into the drawers in my hotel, grabbing my underwear and my pencils and everything, putting them into my satchel, ready to go back to New York. And hey, Elliot, there's going to be a new ending, and you got to write it tonight. And all of us. On my music team, I remember, we spent the whole night sleeping in the studio. I remember sleeping in the booth with the drum set, and then waking up every hour and a half or so to try to, like the goose that laid the golden egg, to try to get out the last theme, and to sort of take what I had already and then create another ending that was even more heroic on top of it. So it was like finishing a wedding cake or something and then saying, well, it's not done yet. You have to dress it up again, and without destroying what's underneath. So it was a very difficult task, and I'm glad it came early in my career. I guess maybe it toughened me up. In retrospect, I'm extremely proud of how the orchestral music in the orchestration, how you can't tell whether it's orchestral or electronic, and in the electronic music you can't tell whether it's electronic or orchestral, and the way the two work together. I had a whole electronic score with then a whole 90-piece orchestra playing over that, and they interacted together with absolute precision, and listening back to it, I was very proud of it.
There was a big issue about not having any score and going strictly with sound. And David really wanted to approach this. This was something that we talked about. And, the studio, I'm sure, in their meetings were, back and forth, because feature films, nope, gotta have a score, gotta do all this.
Personally, I felt that it was very orchestrated, the music. It had a lot of energy to it. It was good. But sometimes, like sound, it doesn't always fit for the moment. If you're trying to do an alien attack with music, sound effects, screaming, dialogue, yelling, whatever, something's got to give. I mean, it just can't be a cacophony of sound. To me, that in this type of movie is not scary. It's just noise.
What is that? Move it! Help me! Fuck!
He did call me one time and said that put too much music in. He did say that to me. He felt that a couple of previews prior we had less in, and we tried less music and more sound and things like that, which he felt was a little, made the movie a little bit more scary.
We had a preview screening at Fox in the Zanuck, and we had created these low subwoofer sounds that were just, they were so low that we brought in these two huge subwoofers that were put up in the front in the Zanuck. And during our preview, some of the frequencies that were created were so low that people actually got up and walked out. Well, the studio couldn't understand. They go, "What's going on? Is there something wrong?" They, of course, they note the time and they look at what's the problem. This is right in the beginning. This is when the spaceship crashes. This is when the explosions go off. Well, people were getting up and leaving. Well, we're watching, and it's mostly older people. So we thought, well, maybe we're too loud. Maybe our sound, maybe the monitoring is way over the top. Well, it turned out that the low frequencies were so low that it was actually shaking the insides of some of these people, and they were actually going to the bathroom. One nice thing working with David was that the fact he gave us this free reign and to be as creative as possible. If you look at the other three aliens, you'll see that 3 had a lot of wet sounds, and not just the texture of the creature itself, but the bishop and other things, because we wanted to bring that element again to part of the scariness of the film, and that was another fun time recording.
We went to an Asian market and got some animal heads and stomach linings and things like this, and we actually what we call Foleyed right on our design stage, and we actually took like screwdrivers and hatchets and hit the head of the sheep and twisted them in and out and all this to get the sounds of like when the guys were getting their heads crunched, or the alien's second jaw would, retract or come out. We used those sounds for that.
We probably should say that no animals were hurt during this film.
No animals
they
were
were
hurt.
already dead, so...
I actually have some geese on my ranch, and I actually recorded the geese. And I had another friend of mine had some pigs, and we recorded pigs, and then we brought them back and treated the sounds of those, and that's how we came up with a lot of the screaming sound of the alien when he was being, actually the hot lead was being poured on him, and also other attack scenes.
One scene that became a real problem for the studio was the scene with Ripley when she's in the medical lab. There was a huge issue with this because they couldn't get the proportions of how big he's supposed to be. And if you look at him, he looks small. He looks almost puppet size. And then when it's up to the close-up, the head was big. So we had to create this thing to make him bigger than he was on the front side, the A side of it, to really create this big, scary, wet, the mouth opening and the jaw and the bone sticking out, all that. So that was another moment again where we had to create something to make our transition, to make it feel real smooth. That was like a big trailer shot.
Yeah.
That was used all the time.
Right.
That shot is probably one of the most used shots from Alien 3.
The bitch is back.
Fincher was lovely to work with in the beginning. He encouraged experimentation. He wasn't that intrusive. He was supportive during the orchestral sessions. Problem set in is when he was getting the heat from the Fox, and for whatever reason, at the 11th hour, he was nowhere to be found. The LA riots kicked in that week during the time when all the decisions on final music had to be made. The mix of the music and the sound effects were horrendous. wasn't going well at all.
We got into some interesting meetings about how we thought things should play.
When we approach a film, we treat it with no music. We assume there's not going to be any music, so we cover from top to bottom. And then when the musical score comes in, then it becomes a mix issue, and then we go back and forth, and we decide then what's going to be used.
I was using unusual percussive instruments and electronic sounds that sounded like sound effects. So in a way, the music was taking on the role of sound effects, music, and orchestral and otherwise. So it became a very, very uneasy relationship in that regard. And I'm sure the sound folks were doing great work, but they tended to cancel each other out in the final analysis.
There was a little bit of, tension once in a while that maybe, the music should take a scene, maybe the sound should take a scene, which happens all the time. And I'm the first to say, hey, if the music's doing it, let it do it.
In the last days of the mix, Terry Rawlings, the editor, was basically had the responsibility of doing a great deal, probably too much, and the dialogue, a lot of it was production. Possibly there should have been more ADR. I don't know. All I know is that it doesn't sound good to me.
Alien 3, I think when it was finished, was kind of a hard movie to embrace. I enjoyed it personally. I enjoyed it a lot, but I saw the kind of anguish of the process on film, and I think everybody felt it.
When I finally saw it, I was thrilled actually, because a lot of what I'd contributed with David was on screen, and that's always a thrill. And the people who'd seen it with me and my family and my friends, they all seemed to like it too very much.
I loved the alien dog creature, and we had fun. We laughed a lot. It's another great cast,
To be brutally honest, I was a bit confused about who was who and what was what, and especially in these corridors, and the sense of geography has all gone to pot, in my opinion.
Kevin! Gregor! Where the fuck are you?
I certainly think it's a worthy film. I mean, there's some things about it. There's some some things in the story that I forgot how early Charles Dance died. And I think I remember that. I always remember going, man, we could have used him later in the story. It's my 2 cents.
What I enjoyed about 3 was that it was about a human apocalyptic tale. That it was less about the monster and more about Ripley and these men. And I was, at one time, admittedly, I was ambiguous about the film, even publicly, because it was a difficult shoot and a difficult period, those 4 or 5 months we worked on it.
I strongly believe that David Fincher had some genius ideas in how he wanted to really make the film, and he probably had to make some compromises in the end, and that way I don't think you necessarily get the strongest possible film. Sometimes it's better, whether it's good or bad, at least have somebody have a really, really strong idea of what they want and go after that.
You have to be able to have one voice, one person that takes things through. Otherwise you can't hope to have coherence. And that, sadly, I think ultimately, for me, was the tragedy of Alien 3 and you know, what ultimately became the film. There were too many cooks. The stakes over-dominated the creative content and undermined it.
I think that ultimately Alien 3 ended up being a certain kind of a compromise to a certain extent, and I know that at least at that time I felt that David Fincher wasn't very happy with the situation.
I think of it as an unfinished film, in a sense that David didn't get to do the movie that he set out and that I was really excited about. So I don't see it as a finished film. I think I saw some of it in a movie theater once, and maybe 5 minutes of it somewhere else, but I knew what they'd taken out of the movie. And you know, it's like the domino effect. Once you do this and that, you know, it creates a whole new set of variables, which creates a different film.
I felt that the big problem with Alien 3 is that it doesn't really deliver on its genre expectations. You know, there's some very interesting things in the movie, but the real basic, you know, if you're making, you know, a horror movie, it should be scary, and I don't think Alien 3 is particularly scary.
I think David did some remarkable things in the film. There are great visual moments, there are great character moments, and that he was able to pull those out without that foundation. A script is the foundation from which any movie is based, and David didn't have that. Yet he pulled out the scenes that work and great images.
In the US, it wasn't immediately, you know, universally loved and accepted, was because I think of the tone of it, of the tone that Fincher had insisted for it, the look of it. It's important. And this was downbeat. I would contend this, you know, that it was David Fincher's style, which actually was slightly ahead of the game, slightly ahead of, you know, later on, I've got a feeling he's vindicated, you know, in shooting in that style.
You know, for American audiences, looking at these bunch of bald guys, they couldn't tell one from the next. That was a constant complaint. They all had English accents, which drove them all crazy, you know. And it ended up doing as well as the first did, which was always surprising everybody, because it wasn't much liked here in the States, but it was abroad. For example, in I don't know, in Europe it did really well, and in places like South Korea it did enormous, in Asia it did really well.
And it seems that actually the audience for it has grown over the years because of video and because of DVD. People realized what it was Fincher was trying to say with this movie, and I think it's become much more accepted in the years since it's come out than it was when it was first theatrically released.
I mean, I hope now everyone will see how good this film was, because it was and still is a good film, but the trouble is it's been hidden in cans for too long.
It's not a perfect film, but really very worthy of being in this succession.
Quick, easy, and painless.
No prayers.
Beginning, there was Alien.
I think they thought they were going to make a sci-fi with a monster in some cardboard box tunnels.
It
originally. It had been an all-male story, and that they'd kind of arbitrarily just said, well, let's take the lead, make her a woman, because no one will expect that to happen.
But you never had a real idea of what the whole monster looked like.
You began to see another world, another, oh, well, a nightmare, a living nightmare in front of you.
Move! Get out of there! Don't you move! Move, Dallas! Get out! Oh, no, not that way! The other way, God!
Then came aliens.
Look, I'm telling you, there's something moving and it ain't us!
There's something very very deep-rooted psychological feeling about this monster. It's a fear that's almost primordial.
The sight of that facehugger just scampering towards Sigourney was really frightening, even as an actor.
Fear is a very strong reaction. It makes people realize that they're alive.
To me, the ultimate scene is when the cargo bay door opens. Sigourney is in the power loader, and the queen alien is threatening the little girl, Newt.
Get away from her, you bitch!
The Queen was a living work of art that performed. She was a state-of-the-art puppet.
I didn't want to be in a science fiction picture, but I thought, God, you know, this is a really interesting woman. I've never seen a woman in a picture like this.
The bottom line is you're there to scare the living daylights out of the audience.
Outside London, on the lot of world-famous Pinewood Studios, Sigourney Weaver, director David Fincher, and crew worked toward completion of the new movie that would take an already classic series to yet another level. The movie is Alien 3, and in the tradition of its two highly successful predecessors, Alien and Aliens, it's making the next leap in the science fiction genre.
Hey, Brad, come on, let's go! Let's go! Wait! One of them still alive!
Reprising her role as Officer Ellen Ripley, Sigourney Weaver prepares once again to face the alien.
She lands on a little planet that's a former prison, and she's rescued, but the people that she's escaped with have not survived. So essentially she has to begin all over again.
In Alien 3, Sigourney Weaver plays against a backdrop of all-male characters, some not so happy to see her.
This is an abandoned maximum security prison. All the inhabitants of this place are sort of the wretched of the universe.
What's her medical status?
She doesn't seem too badly damaged. She's unconscious. I can't give you a more specific diagnosis at the moment.
Will she live?
I would think so.
I'm a prison doctor with a past of alcohol and drug abuse, for which I served my time. And now I'm on the staff, because basically nobody would employ me anywhere else. Into our environment comes a woman, doing and saying some very strange things. So that's intriguing.
Look, I'm on your side. I want to help, but I need to know what's going on, or what you think is going on.
If you really want to help, find me a computer with audio capability so I can access this flight recorder.
We don't have anything like that here.
Lance Henriksen from Aliens, returns in his role as Bishop, the android.
Ripley. Hi, Bishop. How are you feeling?
My legs hurt.
Listen, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Just a glorified toaster.
I play Superintendent Andrews, who's in charge of the Wayland-Yutani Work Correctional Unit on Fury 161, which is the name of this planet. Let me see if I have this correct, Lieutenant. It's an 8-foot creature of some kind with acid for blood, and it arrived on your spaceship. It kills on sight and is generally unpleasant. And of course, you expect me to accept all this on your word.
No, I don't expect anything.
Quite a story, Mr. Aaron.
Right, sir. It's a beauty.
Ralph Brown plays Assistant Superintendent Aaron, nicknamed 85.
So, David. Yeah. You can get these drums organised and...
Right, 85.
And, don't call me that.
85 thing.
A couple of us sneaked a look at his personnel file the day he arrived. It's his IQ.
He doesn't really necessarily believe her. He thinks she's being a bit paranoid now. Maybe she's some sort of, intergalactic terrorist anyway who's trying to destroy the company.
I'm trying to find out why we crashed. And I'm tortured by the idea, it may be paranoia or not, I don't know, that we might have brought an alien with us. We have to do an autopsy. What? I told you. We have to make sure how she died.
It is Ripley's story. She's a classic heroine, and she really pulled it off. I mean, it was her. The first one was kind of her debut, but the second one, a lot of people don't remember that she was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress.
Well, I bet Casey doesn't have scary dreams. Let's take a look. Nope, nothing bad in there. See? Maybe you could just try to be like her, huh?
Ripley, she doesn't have bad dreams because she's just a piece of plastic.
Right. I'm sorry.
You think, well, okay, here's Ripley again fighting the alien. But you're going to be swept away by Ripley in this film, even more so than the first two.
And you watch some of the playbacks on the video and you think, Jesus, she's got a lot of talent, a lot of technique.
I think she was always clearly defined as being someone with a slight, initially, superiority complex, who then, has to grasp and grapple with reality and survival.
I don't think of her as this brave, strong person. I think that women in general are incredibly strong. I just think of her as an ordinary person who is thrust into these extraordinary circumstances.
From the alien spaceship in the first movie to the nest on planet LB-426 in the second movie, artist H.R. Giger has redefined the look of the future.
The sets themselves were a recreation pretty much of Giger's artwork, his mind, his vision.
My paintings always look like plans for three-dimensional things. So it was, in a way, close to do something for a movie. And I think the movie this century is more important than paintings.
To me, the anchor to all the three movies is Giger. I honestly believe that a little bit of Giger will transform you inside.
Well, I think each film of the Alien series has not been what people think the future is going to be. I mean, after 2001, everyone thought everything was going to be like that, and Ridley, in fact, made it sort of down and dirty. And Cameron kept to that tradition to a certain extent, the roughness of space.
Famed British production designer Norman Reynolds provides the design expertise to the sets of Alien 3.
This set really has evolved over a period of time. It's in the future, yet it has a lot of the present and some of the past in it too.
trick, I think, really, for me, or the difficulty has been, which is part of this challenge, is to make the thing look interesting, not overtly sort of science fiction, but to give it a look of its own. One of David's thoughts was, what he was looking for was something where you'd throw in a bucket of water and just hose the place down, the entire planet.
It seems that it's kind of consistent with the other two in that it's, you know, uncomfortable and dark and claustrophobic, and, you know, there's kind of, you know, the same kind of motif, like, you know, liquid and acid and, you know, hostile.
This movie is so gothic in terms of the setting, the sets. This is the most gothic place I've ever been. I've never seen anything like the sets.
This set here is the ventilation shaft set. And this is the alien seems to like getting down in these little corridors and ductings and hiding away.
Anyone who has anything to do with that particular scene needs a storyboard. It's a way of communicating to everybody what the director's wishes are.
Mikey! You found her.
The unique visual style in the settings of all three Alien movies certainly changed the look of science fiction forever, but the most unforgettable contribution to the nightmares of the audience is its namesake. H.R. Giger's futuristic lithographs of a biomechanical creature were just the inspiration director Ridley Scott needed for Alien.
His whole idea was that the thing had such a short life, and it would get darker. The skin would start to get darker as it progressed because it was bruising. And that's why its obsession with having to lay its seed so that it could reproduce, because it knew that it wouldn't have a long enough lifespan.
Director Jim Cameron and producer Gail Ann Hurd had a different approach in Aliens.
We came up with the idea that it could be analogous to a termite or a bee colony or hive. And that allowed for the fact that there could be not only a life cycle that had 3 different factors, but also the idea that there was the biggest, baddest alien of all was the Queen Mother.
Now in Alien 3, David Fincher and Sigourney Weaver have the chance to further the evolution of the alien and come up with new ways to terrorize and thrill Alien fans.
So I wanted to go back to the mystery of having one alien, which Fincher had already decided to do, but he did want a creature that we'd never seen before, this thing that moves so fast and is so voracious and destructive that it's just blinding.
Special effects designers Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff, along with visual effects creator Richard Edlund, worked closely with David Fincher to bring the next generation alien to life.
Giger designed the alien for the first picture. It underwent a little bit of a transformation when Cameron did Aliens. And now Fincher doing Alien 3, it underwent yet another little transformation.
He kept referring to it as a freight train crossed with a Jaguar. You know, it's just something that was just fast and killing, and it would always get its prey, and they'd play with it or toy with it a little bit, but ultimately that would never come back empty-handed from any kind of a confrontation.
In the East Wing! Don't be 7 safe!
It forced us to create a technology to handle Fincher's demands. We came up with this technique called motion, which involves a motion-controlled robotic camera that you can quickly set up on the stage and shoot on the sets, and then you can put the alien as a separately photographed creature into another scene.
We have a head that we call our attack head, which is a pneumatically controlled device that fires a heavy polyester resin tongue out of the head, and is what actually punches holes in our artificial heads to actually do it with the aliens' victims.
What we're doing is creating a false head. We'll tell you what we're doing each time. You might want to close your eyes now.
Your ears? Head casting can be a frightening experience if you're claustrophobic. So we usually sit them down and explain the process.
You'll feel the plaster bandage heating up through the alginate, but that's a normal part of the procedure. We use a dental impression-making material called alginate, which is then reinforced with plaster bandage so that it holds its shape. And then we'll step away and let it completely harden, and then we'll pop you out of this thing. Yeah, there you go. Good. Perfect.
We can set them up on our rigs, and you can graphically see the blood flying and skull breaking and so on.
It's a lot of fun, isn't it, Charles?
As well as defining the visual style of the Alien series, Ridley Scott and James Cameron each gave their movies a different personality.
Action, come down.
Now David Fincher is adding his unique signature.
Fincher didn't really have the job yet. And he said, well, how do you feel about her being bald?
This entire planet that we're inhabiting is infested with lice.
So people have to have their hair cut extremely short, if not shaved.
I am bald anyway, so I probably just fitted into what he wanted.
You get a different kind of respect around town, I tell you.
I looked at one of the studio heads and I said, well, of course, if I'm bald, I have to get more money.
Okay, good, but this part's too long. I'd like A and B cameras on these, please. Can I see A and B? And action!
David Fincher is a genius, basically, for whom I would jump off London Bridge. I trust him implicitly. I mean, I stand awestruck, actually, watching Fincher work. He is extraordinary.
I don't know where a young guy with such an instinct for scenes, where did he come from? I have no idea. I was really surprised.
The issue is we use ourselves as bait. That's the thing that's missing. Okay.
David comes from music videos, right? I mean, he did Madonna and other hot acts, as well as some magnificent commercials.
No matter how tense things get and how overworked we are, etc., and how difficult things get, you can always crack jokes with David. It's a tough thing making a film like this, and Fincher's the only one who has laughed all the way through it.
Action!
Beyond the special effects and technical wizardry, the talent of the cast and the force of the story combine to transport the audience on another journey of pure, unmitigated terror.
It's totally unlike the first two in its approach, in its thrust, its focus.
The great thing about films like this is what you don't see. Is the tiny little cut of the alien or something that happens which shocks everybody. They know it's going to happen, but they're never quite sure when it's going to happen. But we hope we're building up enough tension so that, as I say, when we hit them, they're going to be frightened.
This creature and what he wreaks in the theater makes it great as an experience for us.
The lights go down and you go, okay, take me away. Take me on a roller coaster ride to hell.
It's not reality, it's a nightmare.
Just really staring into the eyes of life and death.
It's going to be shocking because it is different.
Fast and furious and rather dangerous.
I just know that it's going to be absolutely terrifying. And that probably people are going to miss a lot of it because they will be doing this.
Thank you.